Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. If you're watching this from Central Texas or you have friends or family there, I hope you and yours are well. Any other place around the world that might be experiencing bad things happening to them, you're in my thoughts as well, even if I'm not immediately aware of it. But it's easy to be blithe and just say, hey, things are great here. Also, I hope that if you live in a place like I do, where it gets to be a jillion degrees, that you also have access to air conditioning and cold water. I know that some of the places on the in the Northeast are not set up for this kind of temperature for any sustained period. So that's a really dangerous thing as well. So you're also in my thoughts. I hope you're all cool and we can all kind of hate Victor there lazing in beautiful Hawaii. Of course, he had lava flow fires, all that not that long ago, I believe. So, you know, everything balances. Thank you for joining me. Hope you can hear me and see me okay. And I hope that the sound is in sync this damn time. I'm going to start getting to everyone's questions. But as always, at the beginning of the chat, the things that I'm seeing first on my display, I know are not asked, the first things that were asked. I'll try to, it'll get caught up. So we're going to start here with the beginning. So Eckerd Kraus. And YouTube just told me now would be the time to give you guys an ad, and I'm going to ignore that because they're poopy heads. Hey Eckerd, he's servicing a well-conditioned Fender Basement 70. Is it a clever idea to replace, in addition to all electrolytic caps as well as the screen grids and screen drop resistors, these high... Okay, are you saying is it a clever idea or change out all the... well, the screen grid, the 1.5K 2-watt that you referenced, that's actually the grid stopper. That's not the screen grid. That's the grid stopper. There is a screen grid and there is... You have to look at the tube data sheets. There's the basically the where the signal comes in is called the grid, and I'm not going to get into G2, G5, and all that stuff in this context. But the 1.5K 2-watt would be on the grid stopper. So on a basement, that would be pin 5, and it does not need to be a 2-watt. It can be, but half-watt is typical for that use. And the screen grid, the 470R, 470 ohm, is going to pin 4. It's usually connected between pins 4 and 6, and the screen wire bringing the voltage is going to pin 6. Sorry, not enough of this stuff in the white cup yet. 5 watts is overkill for a basement, but that's fine. And I don't like the cement resistors because they have a lot of mass on that tends to vibrate on little bitty leads. So I tend to use 3-watt wire wounds that Vishay makes. It's the the AC or the PAC series. You can see that in all my videos. Do I recommend the replacement of any other parts for reliable use? Well, yeah, as necessary. See my videos. I often replace the resistors in the power supply along with the filter caps. I often replace resistors and diodes in the bias / rectification circuit if the amp has solid state rectification. Other than that, I try to leave all the original components as is, unless there is one that actually needs to be changed. But we'll go to my Vintage Fenders playlist, and there'll be a couple of hundred examples up there at the very least. Hey, Dan Brausch, I'm not sure. Forgive me in advance. Howdy, howdy. I'm a cowboy. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Never far from the far side. He bought a 2004 THD Univalve for $450. Good move, man. Besides good tubes, checking the fuse values and tightening the hardware, is anything else I should check for? Thanks. Well, it is a 21-year-old amp now, which is staggering because I had one of those when it was brand new. I don't feel tardy. But other than the fact that you are going to be reaching the end of the useful lifespan of the original filter capacitors, most likely, Everything else in that amp should be fine, and that's a really, really well designed PCB. And you or a good tech, if you're not up to it, can replace those filter caps, and they're very high quality caps, and everything that was used is still on the market, so it can be made brand new again when it's necessary. I'm not saying you need to do that now. Keep an ear on it. Keep an eye on it as well if you can open it up and check. But if you start to hear sour distortion, notes clashing, things sounding out of tune, or an increase in hum, that's a sign that your filter caps are not filtering. But if everything sounds great and it's quiet, don't worry about it. Enjoy it. Odds are, because that is a very well designed little circuit that Andy Marshall did, that if something goes wrong with the filter cap, one of the fuses will say, nope, not going to do it. And then you get both a warning, and the circuit itself at large is protected. So you should be fine. Let's see. PWT. I want to rock you, PWT. Reference. Electro-harmonics versus Mullard versus Sovtek or other EL84s for AC30s. There's a very marginal difference in sound between different kinds of EL84s. I have used all of those with no problems. JJ EL84s are also quite good. If you can find, and the tube store often sells 7189s, the military spec tube. That could be a great choice as well. The tube will run cooler at the same bias setting. Other than that, it'll sound much the same, but it is more ruggedly built. They do cost a little bit more. But any of the major brands are fine. Just, make sure that that don't spend for something that says Gold Lion or cryogenic or anything. There are only three tube factories in the world, but the Electro-harmonics, the Mullers, the Sovteks, the JJs, they're all fine. I have not tried the TADs on the market, but I have had very poor experiences with the TAD and Pisvane tubes in general, so I do not use those anymore. But of the ones you mentioned and JJ, those are all good choices. Let's see. Thanks, Joshua Stevens. That was the site that I first beheld when I walked into the British Museum. A staggering space, and that was just a snapshot on the phone, and the colors are all wrong, but I kind of like the way the wrong colors look as for a photo, and the iPhone fisheye wide lens just gives that impact. And I needed to have a thumbnail. I thought, well, let me just look through stuff I've got, what might be fun to look at. Not exactly guitar related, but I don't think our lives have to be limited to just one aspect of things. I think even guitarists can appreciate pretty things. And I'm not just talking about tellies. All right, David Herrick here has got a few things that are out of order on my screen. Let me try to put it on your screen in order. Hey, David, thanks very much. About soldering specifically, lead-free on most electronics these days. I know to add a little leaded solder when desoldering components. And he's running to the character limit, so he's breaking up. What about reflowing? Do you have to remove all tin solder before you can reflow with a leaded solder? I did notice if I don't, the solder joints all look like a cold solder joint, very cloudy, dull, no shine at all. Last question, what temperature for tin solder and what temperature for leaded solder do you use? Thanks. Well, yeah, you can either add some leaded solder, which has flux in it, or you can add some flux, and they sell fluxes specifically for lead-free. Depending if you're moving to a lead-free solder workflow, you can just buy you don't have to add leaded solder to it. You can buy the correct flux to add to that. But as soon as you have leaded and unleaded, they cannot mix. So if I have say a Fender reissue that comes in with lead-free solder, and I want to remove the old stuff, I will add a little bit of leaded solder just because it has that core, that flux core, and I will remove all the old solder and gets out. I make sure that all of the old solder is off, and then I reflow. Now I reflow with leaded solder because I'm not trying to export this guy's amp who lives in Tupelo, Mississippi, to Germany or anything. He's going to be using it in Tupelo, and at temperatures and vibrations and stressors that guitar amps experience, good leaded solder is much less expensive than good lead-free solder. And most of the stuff the factories use for lead-free is not actually very good for the purpose. It's fine for making little electronics. It's not so hot when you have heat and current and vibration and weight. But if I were to use lead-free, I would still make sure that I had no leaded. If I'm going to use leaded, I make sure there's no lead-free left. If I'm going to use lead-free, I make sure there's no leaded left. I want a clean slate and start from scratch. Side note, PCBs can be made RoHS compliant, which means that they have no lead in them, and the tinning is lead-free. You can use leaded solder on those boards, and you can use lead-free solder on a non-RoHS board. But it's usually, you just go ahead and do the whole thing. When you talk about PCBs in a factory setup, everything gets inspected. Everything has to get a stamp of approval. So you just go RoHS for the whole thing. As to the temperature, I have read people saying that you need to be hotter for not lead-free than you need to be for leaded. That's not been my experience with pedals and amp circuit boards. I tend to leave my iron at 700 degrees most of the time. I'll go up to 750 or 800 if I'm dealing with a big turret or eyelets and I need to heat up a lot of stuff at once. And sometimes I'll go down to 650 if I have something that's just really fragile. But what I tend to do is I work hot, but not blazingly hot, and I work fast, and I can do the entire thing, leaded or unleaded, at 700 degrees. But I'm using a 2.4 millimeter chisel tip, so I can do the entire 2.4 millimeter contact area, or I can just use the corner of it and have, I guess half a millimeter of contact. So I'm using anything in between. I can apply as much heat as is necessary. And I want to do it for as short a time as possible. Now, it might be that if I were sitting down and doing 100 solder PCBs today, and they're all lead-free, I might find that 625 Fahrenheit is perfect. And if I were doing the same thing with leaded, I might find that 730 degrees Fahrenheit is perfect. But for repair work, as long as I'm conscious of the time I'm spending per joint and how heat's going to affect things and what the traces and pads are like, what their physical condition is, 700 is kind of just how I roll, and it works fine for me. But that's after decades and decades of making mistakes, so I kind of know the warning signs at this point. It's like, it's all fine until you fuck it up, so just don't fuck it up. That's my pro advice for you. Hey Andy, your Maggie 213's vibrato doesn't change speed when the pot is turned. Sounds great otherwise. Bad pot, or you either have a bad pot or a bad solder kit joint somewhere. Maybe the pot's just not connected. That's very likely. If you had a bag cap or a poor path to ground somehow or other, it would tell me that it probably wouldn't work. And since there are going to be 3 things in the LFO, I imagine that the pot wiper is not connecting. But because the way a speed pot works is there is the input, and the pot's wired as a variable resistor, and either the wiper or the wiper and the other pin are tied together through a resistor to ground. So it's usually a series resistance to ground. And if you're not able to vary that resistance because the pot wiper has lifted or there's anything, but this tremolo is still working, that means there's still a path to ground through the pot and the resistor. It's just not varying the resistance. So it may be locked on as fast as possible, maybe locked in place as slow as possible, but probably a bad pot, but it could just be a solder joint. Hey Mark, hope you're feeling better. Hey Sam, what's my opinion on tube dampening rings? They rarely do anything of any use. On a rectifier tube, I see people put them on rectifier tubes. All they'll do is burn the you know, the tube is going to burn the plastic and leave a little rubber residue on the output tubes. Sorry, on the tube. 6L6s, EL34s, etc. Pretty much the same. If you have a tube, an amp, if the tube is so microphonic as that might help, that's not going to help enough. It needs to be changed, and it doesn't do any good, and typically they burn. Preamp tubes, again, not very useful. Maybe possibly defensible with like a 5871 or EF86 or other pentode, which can be prone to microphonics. But if you do that, then you can lose the benefits of shielding the tube that you can get from a tube shield, you know, a little bayonet-based thing. You know, sometimes people say, well, that makes it too dark, you know. But I think generally they're a way to separate people from their money or appease audiophiles, and there's a huge overlap. The Venn diagram between people spending money on bullshit and audiophiles is pretty much a perfect circle. If you do want to have dampening rings, it's pretty much going to be on a preamp tube that would be of some benefit. Don't buy specialty tube dampening rings. Go to any auto parts store and find the high temperature silicone O-rings that they sell. And you want the one that fits a 12x7. I think it's 3/4 of an inch. And it goes right on there, and you can get like 5 for $1 or $2, as opposed to 1 for $20. That's sold to you in a nice package by someone promising. And if you like this, check out our $300 views. Thank you, Jack Smith. Appreciate that. The new, bought in January, Deluxe Reverb has very loud hum on the reverb. What is the exact fix? I'll tell the local amp guy to catch and address. Thanks. Well, I will try to tell you, but I don't like sending people out in the world with the idea that they need to take what I say and then tell their tech what to do, because their tech may already know all this. But if I don't know whether your Deluxe Reverb is a 65 or a 68. The 68 Custom has hum built into it and noise built into it because of the way the circuit was designed. And look at the videos I have on the 68 Custom Deluxe Reverbs for confirmation on that, and I show the fixes in that. If you have a 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue and you have hum, most of the time it's because the tank's installed in the back of the amp backwards. Let's see, just one second. Got a little Princeton here. I chose it because I can pick it up and show it to you. This is the non-reverb model. This is a 63 non-reverb Princeton. Very nice amp, but it serves our purpose. If the reverb tank was down here and the RCA jacks were on this side, you'd have hum. If you flip the tank 180, whoa, that sounds weird. It's like blowing into a bottle. If you flip the tank 180 degrees so the RCA jacks are facing the front, usually that takes care of hum. It's very common for them to be installed backwards from the factory. It's very uncommon for people to take them out and then put them back in wrong, because it's just removing 2 screws and sliding out of the little bag and then putting it back. Let me put this over here. And it's due to the sensitivity of the input of the reverb tank and its proximity to the power transformer. So you're really, in any Fender with a reverb tank, the reverb tank should be oriented so that the RCA jacks, the plugs, are facing the speaker, not facing the rear of the amp. If it's not that, you got a bad tank, possibly a bad tube, and your tech will be all over that. Hey, David, I have no experience with Rev Amps. I'd like to. I've heard good things about Revs, but I've not heard them from techs. I've not heard bad things about them from techs either. I would love for Rev to send me an amp to go through and say, hey, yeah, I can wholeheartedly recommend this or not. But until I have direct experience with one, being inside it, seeing how it's built, what makes it tick, and what it sounds like, and whether it's going to last, I have no opinion of revs other than a lot of people really like them and find them useful, and they've got some really cool looking stuff on the market. But until I have my own opinion, I cannot voice any opinion. Certainly play it. It's going to be a very different sound than the Friedman Little Sister. And they've got a warranty, and they're not a fly-by-night company, so probably worth a shot. But I can't recommend or warn against them yet. Hey, Colin Damo, what is my opinion on the Trainer YGM3 Guitar Mate Reverb 1x12 combo? Pros, cons, construction, etc. I find that is a horrible amp. The examples that I've had were really poorly built, sounded terrible, and I did not like them. I have been told by several, primarily Canadian players, that I'm nuts, that it has one of their best amps ever. And I've also been told in a more reasonable middle ground that the early ones were really good and the later ones were really, really, really bad. And apparently I only have experience with the later, really, really bad ones. So my first instinct is to tell you that the YGM3 is not very good. I would ask a Canadian tech, because more trainers are used in Canada than anywhere else for some strange reason. And more Canadian techs have more experience with trainers than most American techs, certainly this American tech. So I would ask someone who's been working for a long time in Toronto or Vancouver or Quebec City, etc., what they think, because they're going to have a much more informed opinion with a much larger sample size than I have. I love several trainers, but that specific model I do not care for. But again, small sample size. It's just all of them were crap that I've had. All of them that I've had. Not all of them that were ever made, as far as I know. Let's see. Hey, did Amnesia. Got the 65 partial 64 Basement. 100% AV165. Someone hacked it. Someone restored it. I put a new 3-prong updated code, removed the death cap, leaving stock AV165. Any massive concerns? Well, no. If you do the things that you just mentioned, and you've probably watched the videos I've got on the AV165s. It's a nice. Okay, so you got. It's a good amp. Do you mean that 65 partial 64? Someone had made it AA864 in the output, and you changed it back to AB165? Well, in my opinion, and it's not just my opinion, it's demonstrable in terms of noise and sound, the AA864 phase inverter is the way, and the AB165 output section was a step in the wrong direction. As many other things about that amp are cool. The preamp is nice, but if you like the stock AB165, that's fine. There's no concern other than that. I mean, it is what it is. If you love it, that's perfect. You've won. Hey, thanks, Maz Greg. I have done pretty in-depth videos on AC15C1 upgrades. There are some things that I do in that amp that I don't want to share because it took me a lot of hours to figure out how to undo some of Vox's mistakes. A lot of math, a lot of planning, and I don't get paid enough per amp to justify the hours that I had in that. So I've got to make that money back for that time I spent back over multiple amps. If I give that out to the internet, then I don't make much money off having. I mean, this is like a 12-hour process to perfect that thing. The kind of thing that a lot of companies would have done in R&D. But so there are things I do to the AC15C1 that I don't give out. The stuff that anyone should be aware of that makes the amp more reliable, I do give out, and I've shown in quite good detail. But I give an awful lot of free advice and free content and free, hey, this is how to make the circuit better stuff out there. I give a lot away. I can't give it all away. I do have to have some little secret sauces here and there. And if I'm wrong for that, well, it's not the only mistake I'll have made in my life, and I probably won't waste too much time thinking about it later. But, I give away a lot. I will say that a lot less needs to be done to an AC15C1 to make it really good compared to the Fender stuff. As good as the Fender stuff can be. And thank you very much, Mass Greg. Hey, Greg, he's planning to make an amp speaker switching system, just switches and jacks. What AC voltage should you get the switches for? Thanks. 10 amp, 15 amp, whatever. There's not a ton of current. The trick there is that you pretty much want to have a make before break switch. And those options are more limited, because when you do a switching system like that, you never want the amp to have no load. You can have, if you have two different speakers that you're changing between, they're each 8 ohms. At the moment of switching, and it goes down to 4 ohms because they're both on, that's fine. But if at the moment of switching neither is connected, that's when amps get really unhappy. And even if you say, well, I'll just won't switch it while it's on, someone's going to switch it while it's on. So you need to look into make before break switches. And at that point, whether it's 10 amp, 15 amp, whatever, that's fine. See what Carling has. You want to, Carling, NKK, some of the better known companies. And you don't want to say, hey, I found this thing on eBay or Amazon. I don't think you would, Greg, having interacted with you. But you need to bear all this stuff in mind. I would rather pay $15 for a Carling switch and know that it is indeed made to certain specs and so many mechanical movements in its lifetime, then, hey, well, man, I found this other one from this other company for $5. And $5 versus $15, who would buy the $15 one? The one who wants it to work every time. So there are places to save money and there are places not to. Hey, Colby Jack, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Sharp as hell haircut. Well, I did this about an hour and a half ago in my shower. This is a number 5. This is a number 2. And this is a number 1. And this is just buzzing without the guard on, because I have spent money on haircuts and not gotten any better results than this. I'll happily send Nikki to get her hair did for much more money, and she looks phenomenal. Beautiful woman. Absolutely worth it. Get that hair just right. For me, it's just out of my eyes. This is as good as I get, but I got her, so I must have done something right. Thank you very much, Colby. It's weird when I have someone's screen name up here, and I know their real name, and I never know whether to use their real name or their screen name. But hey, Derek, thank you, man. Vogue. Victor's got Vogue from the Big Island when the wind comes up from the south. Hey, Pastor, what Panasonic series film caps are using amp builds instead of, say, Mallory 150s? Well, typically you're going to want to use the Panasonic ECQ series. Now, welcome to the rabbit hole. If you go to Mauser and you go to passive components, capacitors, film capacitors, Panasonic, and then get down to the point where you got radial, and you choose the ECQ series, well, you only got about 10,000 different variations to choose from. So then you go, okay, let's go 630 volt. And then you have all the lead spacing. Now, the lead spacing, if you're doing it for an eyelet board or turret board, is not as critical, whether it's 10, 15, 12 millimeter spacing between the leads. But if you're doing it on a PCB, you've got to get that right. And they sell. If you got one where it's 5 millimeters between the leads, got one where it's 7.5 millimeters between the leads, you got one between 10 millimeters behind the leads, they sell that. So you measure what's on the board, and you can have a drop in. But if you're putting them into like a Mesa, you can say, well, the board spacing is 25 millimeters. I'll just get this 15 millimeter, and I'll just have the leads go out like that. And that's fine, because there's very little mass to them, and they sound great. See my videos on how to order parts. I don't remember what I called them, but I know that I had the word boring in them. So if you go to my channel and search for boring, if you that's if you actually search what I've called the videos. Those videos will come up, the parts selection videos. If you go to Google and do sonic audio boring, way too much will come up. Ah, Dan, that makes me very, very pleased. Danke. I was able to pronounce his name. I'm not sure. I gave it 2 different tries. I don't know which one was correct, but one of them was right. Hey, thoughts on function and value of line input bridging transformers in an FX loop circuit to create what Fender calls a transformer isolated signal. Is this basically a built-in line out box? Yeah. I don't think it's really necessary most of the time in a guitar amplifier, and I'll tell you why. If you have a transformer, even a great transformer, the input and the output are not going to be the same. You're going to lose, and it's going to load the signal coming into it. And so you usually need to bring the level up a bit on the input to offset that. And you need to have the correct impedance to drive that. So you want low impedance, and you want to be able to control that level to drive the transformer. So say if I were making a box that had an A and B output, and the B output was transformer isolated. Well, if I just do a input and then a buffer to give a nice low impedance send, and I split one to output A, one to output B through that transformer, output B is going to be like a dB or dB and a half lower than output A. So I've got to have an additional circuit that says, hey, after the split, bring the signal going to the transformer up by 1 to 1.5 dB, and you have to have everything designed that you can do that without anything clipping. You don't want to add any coloration or distortion, and you want to have the output of each one the same level, even if one is transformer isolated. And so all that is a lot, and if you put it into an amplifier, you've raised the cost of the amplifier a lot, because the power supply necessary to do that is not the same kind of power supply usually provided easily within the amplifier from its power transformer, because that transformer was sourced for different reasons. So in general, it is better to either build this into an external unit that can be used with multiple amps, and then each amp either has a standard low impedance effects loop without any of the doohickeys we're talking about, which can feed into this device that we're talking about, or even if it just has a passive standard high impedance effects loop insert like you might find in like a Dr. Z. You wouldn't want to, it would sound terrible if you put a delay pedal in that passive insert on a Dr. Z, but if you ran out to the box I'm describing, which would give you take the incoming high impedance signal, make it low impedance, and then you can have the power supply built into that can then do anything else you need to do with the levels to make it work with the transformer. It's all doable. To do it in one amplifier makes the whole thing much more expensive, much more convoluted, and then you only have that one amplifier that really does that. So that's the kind of thing I used to design custom external boxes for people. But a line out box is just taking that's whatever signal's present at the input and doing that kind of thing, and it's not ever a substitute for miking a speaker. That's why the part B of my answer is most people don't want that today. Most people will be much better served buying a Sur-reactive load, an aux box by Universal Audio, the Fryette power station, whatever their total needs are, because then you get the sound of the output transformer, not the sound of the signal right before the phase inverter. And then you also have the coloration of speakers, even if it's through IR. Their modern IRs for speaker capture are really good and very convincing and very musical. So I don't think that the days of the line out box as a line out, I think they should be over, because it's crappy. And if you want to do it right, for an effects loop send, or to take a preamp out to some other power amplifier, that's when you get into the external box with all the considerations I raise. And I'm sorry if this is way more than most guitarists care about. But these are things that techs think about, like how to do it right. Because I'm so tired of seeing all the companies that do it wrong and just say, hey, guitarists won't know the difference. Mesa with that terrible parallel effects loop. Ooh, noisy POS. Let's see. Seth B is absolutely correct. Don't use the wrong fuses under any circumstance. Please, please, please. There are people who watch my videos, people who watch Brad's videos, and they'll say, why do you say that, man? You ought to be glad when these things blow up. You know, people bring their amps and you make more money. You know, and I just don't understand that mentality when we say, hey, don't do this, it'll hurt your amp. Don't buy this amp, it's going to catch on fire. I'm supposed to be like some scheming Mr. Smithers and saying, excellent. Look at all the poor suckers out there. You know, to anyone who watches this, that's what their thought process is. Go fuck yourself. We're all musicians. We got to look out for each other. Even those of us who can't play that well anymore. I'm still a musician at heart. And I'm trying to look out for everyone else. And Brad does the same thing, and we should all do that. And if you don't like that, then get the fuck off my channel. You won't like me either. It may take you longer to find out, but you know, there's a shortcut for you. Excellent. Hey, Steve, what may be a dumb question, but what is the death cap and why should you remove it? Thanks so much. On modern wall voltage, on modern outlets in the United States, in Japan, and in Europe, in England, in Australia, the outlet is grounded. And it has a hot and a neutral, and variations of that depending on whether it's 240 or 120. But there is a, let's just simplify for the sake of argument. There's a hot, which should be the hot wire. There's a neutral, which should be the neutral wire. And there's ground, which should never, under any circumstances, be disconnected. In older American amps, Fenders, Gibsons, etc., they were made in the days before grounded outlets. Now, I live in a house built in 1912. I've got 3 circuits in this house that are grounded, and the rest are not. In time, I will have more of them grounded. This room has grounded outlets. It's one of the reasons this is where I do the audio. And but if I get an amp from, say, 1954, it has a 2-prong plug. If I get an amp from 64, it has a 2-prong plug. If I get an amp from 71, it has a 3-prong plug. But in those cases, it had a 3-position. So let me go backtrack. The amps which came with a 2-prong plug for an ungrounded outlet had a ground position switch that was a 2-position. You could either make the hot or the neutral hot, because you could reverse the plug in the wall as 50-50. The plug could go in the wall either direction. So you had a switch so you could make sure that your neutral was tied to the chassis through a capacitor, because then all of a sudden your neutral had a reference to ground and the circuit behaved more properly, and you had some degree of shielding and you were less likely to electrocute yourself. On the 70s amps, when they started coming with the 3-prong, but wall outlets still only had only 2 prongs a lot of times, they knew that that ground would not always be used. So they did a 3-position switch on the back of the amp. So one side would make the hot tied to ground, the other side make the neutral tied to ground, which is really not a good idea now that you actually have a polarized plug, but the outlets still weren't always polarized. And then a 3rd position in the middle where neither was tied to chassis, which would let you take advantage of a fully grounded pathway from the amp to the wall. So that's kind of the in-between as American code was developing towards always being grounded. And you still find that in PVs, and you still find that in Mesas and a few other companies. But it is illegal to sell an amplifier today that does not have a proper safety ground, and that ground should never be interrupted. And it is better to design the amp that it must always be grounded to function correctly, and the hot should always be hot, and the neutral should always be neutral. So we're not going to get into what should old homeowners do right now in this question. But the way that it worked, kind of, sorta, to make, if you were plugging your two-prong 1964 Fender Deluxe into the wall and you had no guarantee which way was which, if you were to use a meter, you'd say, okay, I've got 120 volts potential from the chassis to something that is grounded. That tells me I need to flip that switch because I've got that on the hot and I could die. And flip the switch, all of a sudden the true neutral is tied to chassis through a capacitor. That 120 volts potential might go down to like 2 volts potential. So it's not perfect. It's not a perfect shield, but it's better. It's quieter. The amp runs quieter. You're safer. That's only true if that capacitor does not fail, because the capacitor that was used to tie either side of the incoming AC to chassis ground, and the chassis ground is connected to the input jack, and the input jack is connected to your guitar jack, and the guitar jack is connected to your guitar strings. So if you're holding the guitar and you have 120 volts between your strings and something in your environment which is grounded, say a pool of water or something else, you are trusting a $1 capacitor to protect your life. And that capacitor was never designed to serve that role with high voltage AC current. And they did not have X-class capacitors back there. It's the same capacitor used for film as a film capacitor for the rest of the circuit, which has a very high rating for DC, but not a very good AC behavior. And so it was a bad idea, but for a long time it was the only idea. I know this is a very long answer to what seems to be a simple question, but we get asked about this a lot, so I'm trying to be pretty thorough. So it was an imperfect solution that worked, but that capacitor over time can begin to fail. If it fails open, you're just going to have a noisy amp, and you have this no protection from potential from being shocked. But if that cap fails as a short, which they do, they can and they do, then all of a sudden one of your sides of your AC power is tied to chassis. Now, if you're lucky, it's the neutral, and hey, you're okay. Neutral's at ground now. But if it's the hot and there's no path to ground and your chassis is tied directly to 120 volts or 240 volts AC through the hot being shunted to the chassis, remember that chassis is connected to the input jack. That input jack is connected to the guitar cable. The guitar cable is connected to your guitar, and that means that you've got 120 volts on your strings. And as soon as you touch something metal in your area or water, or you brush against your buddy's guitar where he doesn't have a ground fault, you're toast. It's like putting your fingers into a socket. Actually it's worse, because if you were to touch a socket with your finger, you might feel unpleasant and tingle, but it's not going to have a path through your heart. Anyway, that's enough about that. That's why we call it the death cap. It's not necessary anymore. And if you have an amp that, if you have a place where there's only 2-prong outlets, don't play electric guitar there, especially if it's an old club. And in fact, I tell people, if you gig, go buy one of those meters. I've got 3. They're $20 each. You can see the link in my description for most of my videos on Amazon. And it doesn't have to be that one. There's tons of $10 to $20 meters you can keep in your gig bag. And you can see if the outlets at your clubs are grounded, and if they're wired correctly. Is hot. Other videos show how to do this. Much more accurate than those little plug testers, but you can just carry a plug tester. And if you get to a club and they want you to play and you don't have a safe outlet for anyone, don't play there. Tell all the other musicians in town this club doesn't care about you. I'm so tired of musicians getting the shocked end of the stick, pretty much. Most clubs don't think well of us, and we're just assets to make them some money, sell some beer, be more than that. Insist on being more than that. Hey, Andre. His technician changed on his Silverface Super Reverb 77 the 270 microfarad film caps for two 270. Is this a normal mod? Thank you. Well, those 2 caps are in series. So originally you'd had 270s in series. You had 35 microfarad. Let's just say that. Let's assume all the math is exactly accurate. So 35 is going to be the same amount of filtering as a 60s Super Reverb. It's going to be the same amount of filtering as a 60s Twin, and it's going to have a kind of spongy sound. 2 270s in parallel is going to be 135 microfarad. which is 100 microfarad more than the original. So it's going to be very stiff. You're going to have more. You're going to have a higher voltage overall, and a quicker response on for transients. Now, they're both safe. They're both fine, but those are kind of the two extremes of what a musician will want. 35 microfarad is about as low as you want to go on a 45 watt Class AB amp like that. 120 is a little bit higher than you want to go. Now, here's where this may come into play. If your 77 Super Reverb has a tube rectifier, which it originally did, I believe, but some of the later 70s might have done some solid state, or someone might have put in a solid state. But a tube rectifier in a Super Reverb, which is most of them, that tube is usually a 5AR4, which is also called a GZ34, or a 5U4GB. And those tubes have a maximum capacitance of 60 microfarad. You don't want to have more than 60 microfarad loading on that rectifier, or things can go bad. So if you have a 70s Super Reverb, unless someone's converted it to a solid state rectifier, and you've got most likely a 5U4GB and a 77 Super Reverb, then 270 in series gives 135. That's 75 microfarad higher than your capacitor wants, and your rectifier wants, and that rectifier tube will have a hard life and a shorter life. Now, that is the same mistake that Mesa continually makes. They keep doing that. Now, on some of their amps, they address that by doing the dual rectifier and the triple rectifier. And all the dual rectifier and triple rectifier was a way of having a tube rectifier for sag and feel, while acknowledging that they have 110 microfarad in that first stage or more. Because there's also a current limit that a single rectifier tube can provide, and a voltage limit. So by using two rectifier tubes the way they do in parallel, they can have more current, more filter capacitance, and a higher plate voltage. But I digress. There are a lot of Mesas that have way too much filtering for a single rectifier tube, because they're not actually engineers. They're just making the shit up as they go along. I think they just made amps based on what their marketing team had already put in the advertisements. So anyway, if you have solid state rectification in your Super, you're fine if you like the sound. If you have tube rectification, you really need to get those changed out and go from dual 270s to dual 100s or dual 80s or dual 70s. Because 35 to 50, which is what the vintage range is, perfect for a tube rectifier. But if you have solid state rectification, you can keep your current 135 if you like the sound. Sorry, I have to go all over the map because I'm like, blah, 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 electronically it's fine. But whoa, super reverb, not a twin reverb. If it had been a twin reverb, it would have been fine, just a different flavor. But I'm like, super reverb, tube rectifier, all these things. If I were to have these questions in advance, I would have very succinct, structured answers. But I'm just winging all this shit, man. Hey, dude, I have no thoughts on the aux yet. I'm hoping that I can get my hands on one of them soon for evaluation, because I need something along those lines for my channel, because I get amps in here that are too loud to test here. Not only for my neighbor's sake, but I'm in a relatively small room with a lot of hard reflective surfaces, and even some of the 50 watt amps I can only take for short periods. I've got to protect my hearing. So I'm looking into aux and some other stuff myself. I won't have an opinion until I've used one, other than to say I know an awful lot of good players and techs who use them and like them very much. And I'm expecting to find it to be a good thing. I'm finding that I can get a good low volume with a pedal. What's the point? Well, they're two separate things. If you want to have the sound of the amp really working at a moderate level that you interact with, and the aux box and the SIR and all that are great. If you just want to say, hey, it's late night practice, and I've got a Deluxe reverb on 1.5 or 2, I use an overdrive that's also very valid. Depends on if you just want to hear it or if you want to record it. Though I have shown that you can get great recorded sounds off of very, very quiet Deluxe Reverb, even, or what was it, AC15? I don't remember which I used in the video, which is an SM57. So, but the aux and others are very good. There are some bad ones on the market. Don't buy like the old Marshall Power Break or Power Soak, whatever it was. There's a lot of stuff that was in the 80s and 90s that was not very good. The THD hot plate is good, but not as good as what's available on the market today. Hey, Joe Rinaldi, how to replace or fix a volume pot that turns too freely. I think the wiper does not press enough to the circular resistor in the pot. Can this be fixed as it is surface mounted in a Fender amp? Surface mounted? You mean it's literally a surface mount SMD pot? Or is, I'm not sure what most Fenders don't have surface mount pots, but there might be some model that I'm not familiar with, Joe. There are two answers to that question. Three answers. Sometimes you can open the pot up and retension the little springs that ride against the wafer. And then you can add some grease to give it some more resistance. That's typically on a full-size 24mm pot, like an old CTS or something. You can replace the pot with another one because those pots tend to cost like $1. And you can also just put, sometimes the knob, you can just press harder so that the knob is really rubbing on, the plastic of the knob is rubbing on the metal of the nut that holds the pot in place, and that additional friction gives you what you need. A lot of times I'll have too much tension as I turn a knob on an amp, and I have got to bring the knob out from the faceplate just to make sure it's not riding on that metal surface of the nut. You can, on that line, you could also sometimes get a little bit of felt and put it behind there just to give that resistance between the back of the pot and the surface of the chassis. And that will also keep it from turning too freely. So those very different price point approaches, very different skill levels necessary. But if the pot's working fine, you just wish it didn't turn as fast, look in the last two that I gave you. Hey, Chris R., what's good for cleaning Tolex? Also tarnished pins on vintage valves. Got cleaning to do, but don't want to cause damage. Did I go to Ashmolean Museum in Oxford? All right, well, let's start with the beginning questions. Cleaning Tolex, I usually start with a little bit of dish detergent, like a drop or two, in warm water with a washcloth. And I'll make sure the amp's out and the speakers are out. I don't want to get things wet that aren't designed to get wet. I don't get them on the screws, but just on the Tolex. I take the handle and the chrome ends off, etc. And warm water with a tiny bit of soap, and then a very soft bristle toothbrush, which kind of works in the nooks and crannies. And that gets about 90% of it off. Beyond that, you can use stuff made by Mothers and McGuire's that are sold at automotive stores. Those do a great job as well. Brad down there, Brad's Guitar Garage, he's got some videos showing how he does it. He does some of the absolute best Tolex cleaning I've ever seen. I tend to clean stuff off when it's just really nasty, but I don't usually do the I don't usually do the Martha Stewart treatment. I don't try to make it look like it's brand new, but I do try to get nasty stuff off. Brad makes them look brand new, so check out his channel for more tips than that. Never use ammonia. Never use Armor All. You don't want things that are going to denature the plastic itself, like an ammonia thing, like a Windex, and you don't want to use something that's going to build up a waxy paste on top of it, because it'll get gummy and attract dirt down the road. But Brad's the expert, and Brad's saying I think he's talking about the press peen shaft wiper mechanism. I think the answer lies with the grease having been washed out of the pot shaft over time. That's also possible. I did mention that someone could have flushed the any grease out of the free turning pot from the previous questioner. But depending, I'm not sure if he's talking about a surface mount pot or if it's just flush against the inside surface of a chassis. So I'm not sure what pot he's talking about, so I can't tell you that. Anyway, tarnished pins on vintage valves. And now I got to vacuum because I got little bits of solder everywhere. Just a second. I need to get another one of these little things. I will often just take the tube. Here's a new one, but it'll work. And I just put it there into the copper sponge kind of material in my solder wiper, and kind of do that with a twist. It tends to burnish them all pretty evenly. If that doesn't work, sometimes an eraser helps. Oftentimes I will spray deoxit, but I'll make sure that I'm holding the tube like this and putting the deoxit just on the pins. I don't want it to drip down and take the ink off an old Mullard or something. I need to do it over here so you can see it. So I will first deburnish like that. You can also use little things for cleaning the inside of pipes. And Brad's saying he uses a product called Nifty. Let it soak for a few minutes and scrub in small circle with a oh, he's talking about the Tolex. Okay, well, read Brad's thing about the Tolex now. It's in real time below you. But that usually does the trick. And then if I have deoxit on it, then I will flush that off with isopropyl. But again, it's really critical that if you have an old tube, this is not an old tube, but it has the lettering on it. If alcohol hits that, if water hits that, the lettering will go away, and owners can be very upset with you because it no longer has proof to them that it's a Mullard, even if it's the inside stuff that matters to us. So always do it so that any drips go down. And also, you can put deoxit in a tube socket, like a spare tube socket, and put the tube in and out of that a few times. And what is this video about? Anyway, P.S. Did I go to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford? I did. I love the Ashmolean. I do have photos of the Ashmolean. Unfortunately, for some reason, Nikki was taking most of the photos on our trip. And as much as I love her, she takes videos and photos like this, which don't really work for thumbnails. I'm a landscape guy myself. I like the landscape. So all my pictures make great thumbnails, and all her pictures, well, I can get some of it in there, but yeah. But yeah, I love the Ashmolean. I love the Ashmolean in Oxford and the Natural History Museum in Oxford. We went there as well, including the curiosity cabinet room in the back, which is like going into 19th century, and they had betel nut devices and stuff. It was cool. And of course, in the thumbnail, that's from walking into the main atrium of the British Museum, which is one of my favorite museums in the world. We choose our travel destinations based on museums. New York, other people go to New York for Broadway. We go for the Met and the MoMA and the Frick, etc., and Natural History Museum. DC, we love DC. All the Smithsonian's. Chicago has got some fantastic museums. The Field Museum, the Art Institute, Paris, London, Oxford, Vienna. Florence, the Uffizi. Other people go to beaches. I already have a tan though, so I don't need to waste my time there. Hey, Lovecraft, you might have a chance to get a 1994 Fender Deluxe Reverb reissue. Are there any particular better years for the reissues? Cheers. They are all the same. All the Fender Deluxe Reverb reissues that are 65 reissues, not the 68 custom, the 65 reissues, they're all the same. There are variations, like their first ones came out with the dummy switch on the back that was where the ground switch was, the death cap switch on the old ones, and they still had a $7 switch in there, but it wasn't connected to anything. If you get an older one, you do need to make sure the filter caps have been changed. and that there's no heat damage on the boards. Newer ones, less likely for there to be damage. See my videos on them. I show what that heat damage looks like from the primarily from the heater supply and how to fix it. It's pretty easy to fix it. And heat damage from failed screen grid resistors, also show how to fix that. And the stock filter caps are terrible, but that's terrible in a 2024, let alone a 1994. Hopefully they've been changed. The one thing I look at that makes a difference to me as far as this Deluxe Reverb reissue versus that Deluxe Reverb reissue, if you get a chance, what speaker comes with it? A 1994 would have the generic eminence custom made for Fender, which sounds terrible in one way. And a brand new one today would typically have a Jensen C12K, which sounds terrible in a different way. Those are terrible speakers. Many of the amps over the old ones have had their speakers changed out. So if you get one, it's got a Texas Heat or a Swamp Thing or a black and blue, not black and blue, red, white, and blues, or if it's got a Celestion Vintage 30, that's the reason to get that amp over a different version, which just has one of the stock Eminence or stock Jensens. Because the speakers that those things have shipped with have almost always been terrible. They do some limited editions through like Sweetwater and stuff that, hey, get it with the Creamback 65. Here's one with a Neo. Here's one with a Greenback, whatever. Those are fine. But the stock Eminence, custom made for Fender, and the C12K, some of the worst sounding speakers in the world for a Deluxe Reverb. So, of course, that's what Fender puts in them. Come on, McFly. All right, we're a little bit over the first hour, so we're gonna take our first 7-minute intermission. Some of you guys are gonna get an ad. It's how I pay the bills, but I do it here during the intermissions. And if this is your first time here, I saw some of you were new here. Thank you very much for joining us. At the top of each hour, more or less, we do a 7-minute intermission. Everyone can get a sandwich, get something else to drink, whatever you need to do, and then we'll all come back. And when I go to the intermission, I will tell YouTube to finally give you guys an ad. It's wanted me to give you about 20 ads in the last hour, and I have not. Remember that. Come on, Kay Tucker. We all know that was Potsy, not Ponzi. Never, ever join a Potsy scheme unless you want to end up sitting on it. Let's see. Next question. Hey, Marcus. Good to see you. JTM45 output transformer shootout. What's the difference between a Haybor with 3.4K primary impedance versus a Pacific with 10K primary impedance? Well, you're going to have a very different behavior. 10K seems crazy high to me for JTM45 output transformer, but, you know, people might like that. You know, there are things that are the norm, and they're outliers. And sometimes outliers sound terrible, and they're like, well, that's why that's the norm. And sometimes, oh, that sounds much better than the math ever would have predicted, because there are things that we don't take into consideration. Now, I don't know if you're talking about with 34s, 606s, KT66s, but they're all going to behave differently, and I cannot tell you which one you would like. But if people have been putting a Pacific into JTM45s with a 10K primary and liking it, give it a shot. I think Chris Marin stopped making transformers. I heard something about that. But the difference, if I tell you the difference, it's a 45-minute discussion. The tubes are going to behave differently. They're going to have different transconductive curves, you know, responses, reflected impedances. It all changes. It's a very long-winded, very polysyllabic answer that says they sound different. You may like one more than the other. But in general, I would say the 3 to 4K to 6K is the range most people go for. Yeah, my Hacko is a little bit better than most people have, but I spend a lot more time using it than most people do. And, you know, even a standard temperature controlled solder station like the $100 Hacko or the $100 Weller, it's just not going to be as efficient. So you may have to find a different temperature that works for you. I assume this is in reference to earlier where we're talking about different temperatures for leaded versus lead-free. You really got to find what works for you with your gear and see what, you know, take notes as you go and say, yeah, that I'm consistently getting good solder joints with this. Like, you know, I use 6040. I tried the 6437 stuff, whatever it is, 6637, whatever it is. 6337, I guess it is. 50. Anyway, I tried the other one, and I was having excess flux everywhere. Flowed beautifully, beautiful looking joints. Just so much extra cleanup because it had so much extra flux coming out. I don't know why, but it did, so I don't use that anymore. Let's see. Hey, Christina Carducci. Son wants to invest in a classic amp for home use. Silverface, Princeton, Deluxe, Deluxe, or Blackface Basement Super. Do they all sound more or less the same? $1,500 to $2,500 range suggestions. Well, the outlier there is the Princeton. The Princeton sounds the least like the others, but it still is in that vein. The Deluxe has more emphasis on the mids and less of a fundamental low end compared to the Super Reverb or Twin or Basement. Basement, if he wants to play a lot of rock, the Basement has got a lot more gain than the others. The Basement also does not have tremolo, and the Basement does not have reverb. The others have reverb. It depends on if it's just for home use. For home use, I would say most people are going to be most happy with the Princeton or Vibrolux reverb or Deluxe reverb, because the Super and the Basement are much, much louder and the cabs are much, much larger. I just did a 1980 Vibrolux, and the owner is thrilled with it, but I also did his 66 Super Reverb, which is what he uses for bigger gigs, and he wants me to put the same master volume in his Vibrolux that he did that I did for his Super, so he can cover smaller stages as well, even after I showed him the trick with the Vibrolux of disconnecting one speaker to get a different, lower output level and to move less air. So it's a never-ending quest for most players. If your son is a really good player, I think he would absolutely, and is serious, I think he would benefit from any of these things. If it's a casual thing, and he doesn't spend a lot of time practicing, and it's not something he's really focused on, there are an awful lot of inexpensive amps for home use and modelers, which can be good choices. But I do think that if someone wants to be a real player, no matter what styles they play or where they want to go, I think they will grow as a player by spending a lot of time playing a guitar straight into a Princeton or a Deluxe reverb with just a little bit of reverb, everything clean, and just seeing how they can get different sounds out of their fingers, out of the different pickup. They're going to learn their guitar better. They're going to learn what their hands do better. And you can't hide when you are clean and you're trying to get your speed up, for instance. If you play into a distorted amp with delay, it may sound like God, but you don't hear the mistakes you make. You try to do the same thing into a clean Princeton, you're going to hear mistake. So a serious player will appreciate that because it's an honest feedback. They can hear that, yeah, I'm not getting that right. I need to work on that again. As opposed to, man, that sounded so cool. Because there's a whole bunch of gee whiz that comes with a lot of processing. So I would suggest, if it were my own son and my own son who was serious about guitar, I would suggest a Princeton or a Deluxe reverb. You will never not have a role for either of those amps. I think the Deluxe reverb is possibly the more versatile choice because you can also use that for live performance. And if you do the Princeton, you can use it live. People do use Princetons live, but the genres and situations that you could find that useful are more limited, and the price difference between the two is not that great. My own son wants to play guitar, but he doesn't. It is a backseat to his video game interest. He plays guitar occasionally and wants to get a sound that he thinks sounds cool, and he'll play War Pigs for 10 minutes and then go do something else. So I got him actually I had him buy it himself, but I told him to buy the little Katana 50, and he's thrilled. But he's not going to develop as a player. He's not going to be a player. If you think your son is going to be a player, then I think the Deluxe reverb would be my vote, but the Princeton might be ideal as well. Depends on what styles of music he plays. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with buying a used reissue, the 65 reissue. They're very good amps. I'd rather, if it were for me, and someone said you need to buy a 73 for $2,500, it's going to need $400 worth of work, or buy this used 65 reissue for $1,000. I'll buy the used reissue for $1,000, put a new speaker in it, have $1,400 in it by the time I'm done, and it's a good amp. It's a really good amp. Hey, Colin, there is no quality difference between the USA and Mexican-made Fender Hot Rod DeVille amps. They're all crappy. There is, as far as I know, they never made any in the States. They were all made in, I think they were all made in Mexico. Well, maybe some of the very early ones in the States. But they're all made with the same mistakes. Doesn't matter whose hands were putting those mistakes together. If it is odd to me that people often disparage certain Fenders for Mexicans working on them, when if you were to go back to the factory in the golden era in Fullerton, been an awful lot of Spanish surnames working there doing fantastic work that people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars now for that thing that Mexican built. But none of those great amps were Hot Rod or Blues DeVilles or Deluxes. Those are awful things. Let's see. And again, Christina, are there any older Marshall 50 watts or less. They're not super expensive. What year's models do I like? Did Marshall make a good combo amp? Marshall made a lot of great combo amps, specifically in the 70s and early 80s. And the 2100 and the 1974X are sometimes can be found for reasonable prices. And they have reissues of those, which are pretty damn good as well. But in general, the Marshall amps that are really good tend to be, I think, more expensive than they should be. And at that point, you're getting into a used Germino or a used Friedman, for example, which are going to be equally good, if not better, and cost less. Most Marshalls were heads because people wanted the Marshall stack. It's a cosmetic thing. I mean, there's a sound difference, but people wanted the thing. On paper, no one would ever buy a Chevy Camaro, but people buy Chevy Camaros because it's a thing. As a matter of fact, it's never been a good car except for the '68 six-cylinder, but I digress. But super expensive. I think for most players, unless they have the money to play the vintage game and be very selective, they're going to be better off with a Germino or Friedman or Suhr. And that's what I would point to, because you can get a used 20-watt Friedman Runt combo with a 1x12 with a really nice Creamback 65 for like $1,000-1,200, and that's going to be a better amp than most Marshalls made up to about 80, from about 74 to 83, and certainly better than the stuff they've made since 1990. And the same thing can be said for Suhr, same thing can be said for Germino, Metropolis. There are a lot of good options now that don't have the M word. You pay an awful lot for the M word these days. And I wish I could continue to sing their praises, but they have been bought so many times. They are no longer Jim Marshall and his buddies making things for musicians. You know, Jim Marshall was a musician. He was a drummer, a really good one. And he made things for musicians. And then it's been bought and it's sold. And it's all about brand equity and investing in portfolios and stuff, and what kind of refrigerator can they sell you, and Bluetooth headphones can they sell you. And the apps are kind of an afterthought. Greg G likes Jazz Masters. What's wrong with him? Not a damn thing as far as I can tell. If I had more money and more space to store things, I'd have a Jazz Master too. I love Jazz Masters. They're just not one of the things like my prime choices. But other people, that's everything they're looking for in electric, and they're not wrong for that. And Leo designed it to be the best guitar ever made. That was his flagship. He thought the Jazz Master was going to just dominate the market. And I don't think Leo ever really knew what surfing was. It was a surprising revelation. Hey, PF, I am very well. Hope you are as well. Just got a 1980 2203 from your studio in Winchester, England. Has a new match quad of JJ's in it. Is a 300-watt dim bulb okay to fire up long enough to test? Thank you. Absolutely, that's what I've got over there. You could even use 150 watt if you wanted to. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. Most amps on the back of them say what their current draw is under normal conditions. Let's see. Well, the thing on my bench right now doesn't say that because that's a stereotone thing. But anyway, they'll usually say what the expected draw from the wall is, and if you have that capacity with your light bulb, you're fine. Okay, so it sounds like you already have the 864 output, because the 64 phase inverter is the AA864, and it's so much better than the AV165 output section. It's the phase inverter, the way everything's wired, not having the local negative feedback on each output tube plate, because plate to the phase inverter plate. It's just a really weird circuit, and if it sounds good, then someone's already reversed the black and green on the output jack on yours. So. Thank you, Andy. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that. I love getting good feedback from owners. I don't tend to put this kind of thing on the channel because it sounds like I'm self-congratulatory, but it's nice occasionally to take a little lap. Let's see, I got one from Sam Burchell the other day. I did the 65 Deluxe Reverb for him and that 79 Marshall. He says, he won't mind me saying this. Thank you so much for the exceptional work you performed. The Deluxe now sounds as good as it looks, like fresh off the assembly line. The 2204, when not playing, is quieter than I thought a Marshall could get, and now has the perfect classic 70s Marshall tone, with all the versatility back in the controls. I'm grateful we went on this journey in restoring these 4 amps. I met and exceeded his expectations. Thank you very much there, Sam. And I'm going to give him a call because I got this last night and I was doing other things, watching the world blow up outside. But it means a lot when I hear back from Andy and Sam and people. What I've done, I do this because I want people to love their amps. And they've got these really nice amps. I did a whole bunch of really nice Fenders for Andy and did a whole bunch of Marshalls and stuff for Sam there. And it means a lot to me to know that, okay, they're not just satisfied, they're happy. That's the goal. So thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. Hey, Lucas. Thank you very much. This is probably a hard question. What is my favorite amp for myself other than my own? I get asked variations on this question all the time. My desert island amps would be either, I love the Super Reverb so much, but it's so much to deal with, and the Deluxe is almost as cool, but it has some other characteristics, and then the Deluxe Reverb also has great characteristics. The 58 Deluxe is fantastic. The 5E3, that's one of my desert island amps. The original Tweed Basement 58 through 60 Tweed Basement, which leads into the J-Team45, which is another desert island for me. A 68 lead, if I have a really big place to play it. AC15, it's like a 62 AC15. 62 through 67 AC30 is one of my favorite. I especially love the ones with the silver cone, the silver speakers, the silver bells. These are some of my favorite things. And the real solution would be to have at least one of each flavor. Maybe I could find common ground between choose one or the other over the 5E3 Deluxe versus the 62 AC30, because they overlap. And I think the 62 not AC30, AC15. I think the early 60 AC15 is the better choice there. So all right, we're going to do the tier thing. Old AC15, JMI AC15 over 5E3 Deluxe. But the 5E3 Deluxe is still awesome, and it'd be nice to have one if you can have both. 62 to 67 AC30 is a no-brainer. Those are just some of the best amps ever made. I think I'd like to have like a 64 through 67 Super Reverb. And nothing wrong with 67, 68. I like the earlier cosmetics better. The amps are electronically the same. Super Reverb for a big amp, and just take a Deluxe Reverb and let other people play the games with the Vibrolux and the Princeton. The Princeton is great. I love the Princeton, but if I have a Deluxe Reverb, I don't really need the Princeton. If I have the Deluxe Reverb and a Super, I don't really need the Vibrolux Reverb, which is kind of the sweet spot in between. But if I only had to have one, maybe the Vibrolux Reverb. You see how this goes. 68 Marshall. I mean, I'd have to build one because I don't think I could ever afford a 68 lead these days. But you could also just see what Friedman and Sur offer. They both have very nice versions of that circuit, done to be less noisy and much more reliable. I'll tell you what, it's not a JC120, and I owned one for way too long. And if I needed to do metal or something, honestly, and I like playing hard rock, if I needed something that I couldn't get with the Marshall or Marshall style amps, for that kind of music, the modeling stuff these days is really phenomenal. I think the fractal stuff allows you to sound better than any of the ultra high gain amps ever have, with the exception of maybe the SLO, the Soldano. Though again, I don't like one of the bright caps in the Soldano. Gets kind of a little bit like that. But you know, the other than the Soldano, I'd rather have a fractal than a dual rectifier or 5150 or any such things, because you can get a better sound. You're not going to have all the hum. You're not going to have all the microphonics. You're not going to have all the failures from poorly implemented muting circuits and underrated capacitors and stuff. You know, so. Hey, Kat, I do. I have a face. I've been doing these live streams for a few years now, but I tend not to be in the amp videos because all you need is the amp, my hands, and I guess my narrations, so I can tell you what you're seeing. But in the live streams, it's nice to have a face, because if I'm just doing the hands, it gets kind of weird. Let's see. Hey, what are my thoughts on adding a resistor in series with a solid-state rectifier to simulate sag? How close does it really get? Well, a lot of people will add the sag resistor after the rectifier tube, between the rectifier tube and the reservoir cap. And that works, but you're also going to be generating the most heat and dealing with the most current through that. And that's the wrong way to do it. The better way to do it is to use two smaller resistors between the AC HD secondary from the power transformer and the connection points on the GZ34 or other rectifier tube where the HT secondary is going. That way, each resistor has half the current, and you don't have to bring the total down as much, because a small percentage of change on the HT side, the AC side of the rectifier, will result in a large change on the DC side. So if you want to go down by 30 watts, so let's say 30 volts, you go down 30, 50 volts on the DC side, you've got to dissipate all that heat. You've got to deal with that current. You got to have stuff that can handle that. It's got to get hot. What do you deal with that? But to bring down that same 30 watts on the secondary side, on the DC side of rectifier, you only need to bring down the AC on the maybe 3 volts, because it's all scales. If you do some tests with this, you'll see what I'm talking about. But if you want to have, if you say you have 400 volts B plus and you want to bring that down to 350 volts B plus, you can either do a really big resistor with a lot of heat issues on the DC side, or you can do two smaller resistors to bring it down the same amount on the DC side by putting them on the AC side. So you're only bringing down the total voltage from the secondary 5 to 10 volts as opposed to 50 volts, and you'll get the same change, but you're going to have the same feel difference. So that's how I would do it. Look at the schematic. It's pretty easy to find out there of the Vox AC30C or AC15C. That's how they do it, and they did it well, because they're able to use 5 and 10 watt resistors to do this, as opposed to using a 20 or 30 watt resistor or a chassis mount clad resistor, etc. It gets really close. Really close. Hey, Matambare. Thank you very much. Yeah, the thumbnail, I took that at the British Museum in London. That's as you walk in to the atrium where used to be an outdoor courtyard, and they enclosed it, and it's a fantastic space. One of my favorite places on the planet, that, at least as far as man-made things go. And the haircut is definitely temperature appropriate. Yeah. I just buzz it and go, because it's too hot to mess with anything else. I do prefer Mauser over DigiKey, and I cannot tell you why. I've ordered many things from DigiKey over the years. They're equally as easy or equally as difficult to navigate, and the prices are comparable, and they carry much the same thing. I just tend to go with Mauser. I don't know. DigiKey used to have a much uglier website than Mauser's. And DigiKey does one thing that I don't like, where they'll say that they carry something and they have it in stock, but if you click, you can actually see it's a marketplace item. They're actually getting it from a third party. And often They're shipped separately from everything else, so you have more shipping charges, and they'll often be way overpriced on those things if you're not paying attention. Like, there was a pot I needed for something, and I found it at DigiKey, and it's like $7 for this pot. And I looked closely, and I saw, hey, this is a marketplace item. And then on the fine print, it said, this ships from Tube Depot. I'm like, well, fuck, I know those guys. I called Tube Depot and said, hey, do you have this pot in stock? And they did. And it was like $3 from Tube Depot versus $7 from DigiKey. But not only do they have it, they told me that they got it at C Distribution. It was listed as something else at C Distribution. CE Distribution sells to people in the industry that same pot that Tube Depot sells to at retail at $3 for $1.50. And so I could buy the pot for $1.50 because I have a business license in the industry. I could buy the full retail price at $3 from Tube Depot, and you could buy that same thing at $3 at Tube Depot. Or you can buy $7 from DigiKey, who just buys it at $3 from Tube Depot, has Tube Depot ship it to you, separate shipping charge, and DigiKey makes $4 off of it. Mouser has not been doing that. So in that regard, I do like Mouser a lot more than DigiKey. But the stuff that DigiKey sells, that they actually stock and they have in their inventory, good stuff, good shipping, everything's fine. I just don't like their marketplace practices. Tor is waiting in a lounge for a flight to Amsterdam for a fun week. Oh, man. Well, have fun. I'd be making a beeline for the Rijksmuseum, but you do you. We very much want to go to Amsterdam, and through the Netherlands and through Belgium, and then end up in Normandy. That's our next planned trip, from Amsterdam through Bruges and Lille and Amiens and Rouen, and maybe end up in what's it called? Crap. The little town in Normandy where they have the parachute on the church. It begins with a B. I can't remember. Anyway, then drive to from there, or take the train from there to Paris for a day or two, then fly back. So that's our next big world trip. But it would start in Amsterdam. I've only been to the airport in Amsterdam. They had a really nice Irish bar there, though. No, not Britannia. That's an entire region. It's a little town. It was important in D-Day. This is right by Utah or Omaha Beach. Anyway, that's one of the reasons we want to go. Yeah, I can download parts as a spreadsheet on Mouser as well, Ted. Hey, Tor, I have never seen Celia amps. I saw that video that Paul did, and it's not Ka. I'll find it later. It begins with a B. Samara Église is where the church with the parachute is. It's right outside there. Just a second, Tor. I got to figure out what I'm thinking of. It's going to be bugging me the rest of the chat. Let's see. Normandy. Let's see. Maps. Won't take me long. I know this is not very exciting for you guys, but it's driving me nuts. Oh, crap. Man, Google Maps does not show the names of towns large enough. Unless you know what you're searching for already. Well, I'll find it another time. Dang it, dang it, dang it, dang it. Bayo! Thank you, Arrowholic. Sorry, I would have seen that if I was not looking for it. Bayo, yeah, we want to see the tapestry, and it's a beautiful town, and, you know, there's so many things along the Normandy coast. We're not going to do the Mont Saint Michel thing because it's just, it's beautiful, but it's very overcrowded. We're going to go places where they're not, and I want to see the Bayeux tapestry. We want to have the ciders. We want to have the cheeses, and take our time. I want to rent a car to go from Amsterdam. I'll probably take a train from Amsterdam, and maybe in Bruges rent a car, drive through Normandy, and I can't remember the region between Normandy and Belgium, what that's called, but you know where Lille is. We just want to enjoy that culture, see a lot of small towns that you skip on trains, find local food, go at our own pace, go to places where history has happened, not just Normandy, not just Dunkirk, but you know, from my perspective, I'd like to see Agincourt, if there's anything left to be seen, and go to Ypres for World War One. You know, when you have an awareness of the history. I can't believe I forgot Bayeux. Speaking of history, we didn't make it to Hastings, but I can make it. I can go see the cartoon about it. Anyway, I guess I'll get back to people's questions. But in terms of the Celia amps, I thought it was a nice amp. Not as staggering an accomplishment as Paul seemed to think. I didn't think it sounded very good in that video, but that was the way it was recorded. And it was very nice of Paul to give a small company that kind of exposure. I think Paul's a really nice guy and a great player, but I didn't think that amp was anything shocking or revolutionary. Hey, PF. Second question on a 1980 2203 English Marshall. What change should I make to fuse size to use 120 volts before firing up on dim bulb to test voltage and bias safely? Again, in general, if you're using it, if an amp is rated for 240 volts, you're going to use half the fuse as the amp when set to 120 volts. So yesterday's video, or the day before his video, where I'm checking the fuse on that 62 concert, and it said 3 amp fuse. If that concert were being used in Europe with a 240 volts main transformer, power transformer, it would have been a 1.5 amp fuse, not a 3 amp fuse. So in general, if you have an amp that takes 4 amps at 120 volts, it takes 2 amps at 240, and vice versa. So if your Marshall can be used at 240, has been used at 240, and had a 2 amp fuse in it, and you switch it to 120 volts use, put in a 4 amp fuse. Hey Lucas, I have not worked on the Hendrix amp, but this sounds like name dropping. It's not. I've not brought this up before, but germane to your question, 15 years ago, over 10 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, I got a call one day. I was here working, and Martin Music called me because they were doing a PRS clinic later that day. David Grissom was playing. And I was going to the clinic because David Grissom I knew because he used one of my pedals. But Paul Reed Smith was also there, and one of the amps that he was going to be demonstrating was the PRS Hendrix amp, and the amp, for whatever reason, had a problem, and Paul was going to fix the amp, but he didn't have any parts. And so I just started throwing common resistors and caps and stuff in a box. And I went up there and I met Paul and spent about an hour and a half with him. He would ask, hey, do you have a this? Hey, do you have a that? And I would. So somewhere out there, there's one PRS Hendrix amp, which has got a mixture of whatever they use from the factory and some Zycon carbon films that I had and some Mallory 150s that I had, and I think a couple of F&Ts that I had. Something went wrong with that amp. Paul fixed it on the spot, and at the end of it, it sounded great. And he was very pleased that I was able to bring him all this stuff, and he asked what I owed him, and I said nothing. It was very nice to meet you, because it's fine. I'd rather have Paul Reed Smith think kindly of me than have him owe me $15, whatever it was for the parts. But it was nice to hang out with him. He was a very nice guy. He wasn't in representing a company. You know, it was just him and me and a friend of mine who's a luthier in the luthier's shop where he was doing the amp repair because he had a soldering iron, and I brought a few other things he would need. So it was just the three of us. He wasn't representing the brand. He wasn't being Paul Reed Smith, entrepreneur. You know, he was just Paul, and he was fixing this amp that for whatever reason had a problem because he had a big clinic coming up that day. And he fixed it, and he knew what he was doing, and he was not dismissive of anyone else, and he was not secretive about what he did. And that amp sounded really good when he was done. I think part of it was that amp had a problem. I'm trying to remember. That particular amp had a problem, and he had made a change in the design since that particular amp had left the factory, and he was bringing it up to his current spec, which he was carrying around in his head, which I can relate to. So I had a very pleasant afternoon with Paul, and then I got to meet David later that day. That was very nice, and a hell of a player. But I think that amp is a good amp, and the David Grissom models are fantastic. And if Paul ever meets me again, he may be very upset with me for some of the things I've had to say about, like the custom 2-channel C and the custom 2-channel H, and the Sanzeras and the Archons, because those are not very good amps for various reasons. But the DGT amps are great, and that Hendrix amp that came out 10, 15 years ago was very, very good. I don't remember if that was the Woodstock, or he also had a Fillmore model. I think that might have been the Fillmore. But I've not tried the 20-watt HX thing they've got out. About 3 years ago, every guitar channel in the world but mine had the HRDX 20 or whatever it was called, and they were all saying this is the best amp in the world ever, all of them at once. A couple of years have passed, and I don't see them using it on their channels. It's the best amp in the world. They all had one, and they don't seem to be using it. You might notice that my channel does not get all those things. I don't get the new Acoustasonic. I don't get the new this, that, or the other that everyone gets. I just don't play that game. I could play that game. I've got enough subscribers. I could get right in on that game and tell you how awesome all this shit is. And I would not want to, that's not what I want to do. So I also want the ability to say, hey, this amp is great. And you know that I think that amp is great because I think the amp is great because of X, Y, and Z that I'll tell you about. And if I think that amp's got problems, it's because that amp's got problems, you know, as do we all. But, hey, Victor, got a Sano amp. All right, point to point, waiting for my house to be built first. So future project needs a 3-prong electrical cord. Any suggestions? Well, I'm unfamiliar with Sano amps, Victor. Was their motto just say no? But any of the videos I've got where I show putting a 3-prong cable on an amp, that's how you do it. Pretty much all my vintage Fender playlists will cover that same thing. If you have any questions, take it to a tech. Hey, Alex, is there a threat of shock if I have an old solid-state combo that has a 2-prong plug? Yeah. Anything that that's electrical that only has a 2-prong plug, if it has a transformer, which a solid-state combo does, it's going to have a transformer, has to be grounded. Now, you may have devices in your home which only have 2 prongs. and they're fine because they don't have a transformer. There's not a lot of current. This laptop here, this is a backup Asus laptop that I use for some old programs that I need Windows for. That just plugs into a DC converter that has 2 prongs because there's nothing happening there that there's any current. Anything that's transformer based has to be grounded. Anything with really high voltage. Your refrigerator is grounded. Your stove is grounded. So I don't play around with old amps with 2-prong plugs. Get it grounded or don't use it. Let's see. Well, Seth B., you are an outlier because you are a tech, and you can monitor the health of that cap, and you can be very sure that you do not have 120 volts potential between the chassis and something which is grounded. So what you do with your amp is fine. It's like I got some shit from Steve Fryette a couple years back because I had just said in one of my videos, don't reform your capacitors, change out old electrolytics. Electrolytics dry out and they're not trustworthy. And he was the next video he put up, he was reforming the caps in his amp. And even though in his video he said, if this doesn't work, if they sound bad, I'll change them. But then he got mad at me in the subsequent video for saying, never do that. In a nutshell, much like Seth can do this because he knows how to observe that, Steve had said, hey, if this starts to sound bad, then I'll change them. And I'm a tech and I know what I'm doing and I know what the risks are, I know what to look for. There are things you can do as a tech for your own app. You can say, well, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's fine. And I know that I'm safe. That you wouldn't necessarily do for a client. And you certainly wouldn't do for a client that was about to go out and play live and do club gigs with or a world tour with. There's a difference between, hey, that's close enough for me, and no, that's ready for prime time. That's going to be reliable for the next 20 years. So I thought it was bizarre that Steve had issue with that. But, if I don't want us to go any more than that. I'm not here to pick fights. People have immense respect for Steve. And if he has a problem with me, you can call me and we'll talk it out. We'll hug it out, man. We'll hug it out. I'll hug the fuck out of you. Let's see. I hope he knows I'm kidding. Not on the be nice and respecting thing, but on the. I guess that did de-escalate into like an implied threat of violence, just for giggles. Let's see. Thoughts on the AC30BM Brian May Signature Circa 2005? Does it have the same flimsy fretboard series as the Heritage series? What about the AC30HW2X? Hand-wired series is different than the Heritage series. So the hand-wired series has problems, but not the flimsy construction of the Heritage series. And you can see I've got tons of videos on the hand-wired series. I don't think that they're worth the money that Vox has charged for them. I think a lot more needs to be done to those to make them good than needs to be done to the custom series. But if you got a hand-wired, that's fine. As far as I know, the Brian May signature, there might have been more than one. I think it was just the TBX with 90% of it removed. It's just a normal channel and a phase inverter, just a normal channel, a phase inverter in the output section, and volume and cut, and that's it. And everything extraneous has been stripped out. And it was a starting point for him to be given like 10 of those that his tech would then replace all the insides with what he would actually want that could actually be used live. And they're nuts. They install, they're not nuts, but it's over the top for most people. They install individual cathode fuses with LED indicators. It is a big production that they do, and they basically rip everything out and use the chassis. I don't think that most people have any interest in or business buying a Brian May version of the amp, because you can get any good AC30 and just plug in the normal channel and have what he used until like 74, 75 when he started having amps made for him. All the stuff up to Bohemian Rhapsody, that was old AC30s. Still had a vibrato channel, still had a brilliant channel. He's just plugged in the normal channel. Later, he streamlined all that for live, so less interference, but and they made changes like 270 ohms here where it used to be 100 ohms, stuff like that. Uh, a lot of changes actually into the filtering, but I would not seek out the Brian May signature unless you are just the world's biggest Queen fan. In which case, go for it, man. You want it all. See you, Greg. I guess he left 30 minutes ago, but I'm saying it now. Let's see. Have I ever checked out Benson amps? What is my take on them? Well, I've worked on a Benson. It was really well built, a little bit elaborately decorated in some ways on how the cabinet was put together. I think it had like clear. I'm remembering like clear plastic over piping and stuff. Kind of gave me grandma's couch vibes. Don't sit on the furniture. That's only for company vibes. But the amp inside, it was really well built and sounded great. But that was a sample size of one, and it was complimentary, though I had some aesthetic differences with it, if I'm remembering correctly. Steve Dupee or Dupay, I'm glad that made sense for you on the power explanation. Hey, Scott. Thank you very much. On a vintage Deluxe reverb, I like the Vishay 22 microfarad 63 volt electrolytics, assuming I use them because they're within the tolerance range. Well, I use them not only because they're in the tolerance range, but I mean, there's only like 1 to 2 volts present on the cathode typically. A couple places it goes a little bit higher than that in a Fender, but nowhere near 63 volts. So I use the 63 volts for 2 reasons. They cost about the same as the 25 watt version, and it's usually there's more of them in stock than the 25 watt version. They're not physically much larger at all than the 25 watt version, and I can buy 100 or so of them at a time, and I can use them in a lot more places than just a cathode. But when I use them in a place where there's only 2 or 3 watts present, I know that it's going to last probably 40, 50 years. Because it's not ever going to be stressed, and they're really high quality. But I can also use them in a bias supply or other places where the voltage is higher than 2 or 3 watts, and they're very useful and they're pretty, and I can use them in just about every amp that takes an axial electrolytic for a bias or cathode bypass purposes. But if I were just speccing them out, back in the day, you could buy 6 volt caps. You can't anymore. I think like the 220 or 300 volt cap in a Basement or JTM45 is like rated for 6 volts. You can't buy it. Well, you can find one and spend $18 on a cap rated for 6 volts, or you can just get something that 25, 63 volts is fine. But there are fewer electrolytics being made in axial form now. So, 20 years ago, Vishay would have had them from 6 to 10 to 15 to 25 to 30 to 40 to 50 to 63. Now they pretty much got 25 and 63. They're about the same size, about the same cost. 63 is the more versatile thing to stock. Thanks, Alex. I'm trying to, in theory, I've been told that the network's supposed to be fixed Monday, and this time they mean it. I did get some better results in some testing yesterday, but man, I crashed and burned on 2 tries the other day, and I deleted them. But Verizon is not making this easy, but I have good plans. We're going to take our next intermission, so I will see you guys in 7 minutes, and then we'll get to Goody Guitar's question. Some of you will get an ad, some of you won't, and some of you never will. For those of you who saw my Sunday driver video a couple weeks back, at the end of it, I went to get a beer at a place called Celtic Crossing here. And like a week after I filmed that, someone fell asleep at the wheel. But 9 in the morning, fortunately, they said medicine thing. Anyway, took a silver SUV up on the sidewalk and straight through the front of that restaurant where I was showing you guys, and just demolished everything. And I was going to show that the other day when I tried to do the live stream, and it wouldn't work because it was just demolished. They've got it back up and running, and they got temporary fences set up, and they've got cheap folding tables set up and plastic stuff, plastic chairs and stuff. They're getting back, they're running again, and we're going to go there for dinner tonight, support our local pub. But I was trying to show you guys the devastation, but Verizon said no. But this kind of place, if any of you guys came in town, I'd say that's where we're meeting. Had a lot of stuff I was going to show you. No one was hurt. It's amazing. Well, the man who was driving the car was injured, but not majorly. But apparently he passed out to his medicine. If that had hit any other time of day, it could have had dozens of casualties and deaths. But at 9 in the morning, no one was at the pub. So anyway, speaking of the driving videos Alex was mentioning before we went to the break. All right, I'm trying to get through some of the questions so no one gets left out in the wind. Goody guitars, when I work on a chassis, I have to have a load on it, if not the speaker, then resistor. What about the reverb wires? Is it okay to leave them dangling? In general, it's best to have a reverb tank connected. For short duration testing, it's usually fine to have the reverb disconnected. You can always make a dummy plug if you're concerned about it. It is essentially a tiny output transformer that wants to have a load. The little RCA dummy plug that I'll put in the back of an amp to turn on and off the tremolo is necessary. Sometimes I'll put on the reverb send of an amp. If I'm doing a lot of work, it has to be electrically on with tubes in place, but there's I don't want to reconnect the reverb tank. That's safety for safety's sake, but in general, it's fine to leave the reverb wires dangling. Let's see. I'm skipping some stuff like Ted Mix's 3X, Triple X, because I'm trying to get to questions, but I do see you, and I appreciate you being here, even if it doesn't get popped up on the screen. Let's see. Hey, Murray. Hey, Ben. Good to see you. I'm enjoying that telly very much. Let's see. Talking about what were the old Fender hand-wired boards made of? Why do they sometimes leak? Hey, Steve. It was actually a cardboard that was designed for lining suitcases. It was a stiff cardboard that was basically dyed with something that stiffened it up, and Leo just took that had his people put hole punches and then eyelets designed for sewing. They're eyelets for putting laces on shoes, and they would just pop the hole in the board and put an eyelet in there, and just vulcanized, same stuff you use for drum cases. Yeah, so it's basically just really stiff cardboard that had a little bit of water resistance, with some brass eyelets clamped to it. Bob's your uncle. Now the trouble is, over time, that cardboard is still a form of paper. It absorbs moisture, and as it absorbs moisture, it will form a conductive path. And so when I clean one, I soak that area in isopropyl alcohol, and I follow it with heat. And as it heats up, that alcohol boils out and displaces any water that was in the board, because the water, science. So the alcohol displaces the water and pushes the water out as it's pushing itself out as it gets heated up, and then you don't have any water in there. And later they changed to a wax coating, which is designed to prevent the water from getting into the board. The trouble with the wax is that the wax, as the amp is used, the wax gets warm, the wax gets soft. Any particles in the air that are floating around settle on that warm wax. The amp is turned off, the wax hardens, it's got some particles in it. Happens again and again and again, and every time more particles get added to that wax. And over the decades, that wax itself has so many particles in it, the wax becomes conductive. So I've got to get the DC out of those boards, I've got to get all the wax off. So it's fun. But literally, it was the same stuff designed to be used to line the inside of suitcases. A very stiff cardboard. Let's see. And then Seth is giving a more detailed version of the same answer. And he's right. He's absolutely right. Let's see. Getting to the... Joe Rinaldi, it's causing the amp volume to cut out. Replace the pot. That's the best answer. My thumbnail is like a Yes album cover. Well, I think it does look cool. That's the wide angle lens getting that atrium. Y'all are all older than me, except for Brad. Brad's the kid. The bald bearded kid makes me feel really old. And Sash DC's young. Well, Sash DC, maybe you're older, but I don't know if I know anything. I try to learn as I go. Someday I'll make some progress. Hey, Remco Friesians. Greetings from Switzerland. Apologize for butchering your last name. I've not run into that one before. He's a beginning amp tech. My video is very helpful. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And if you're still in the chat, if you could give us a pronunciation guide. I like to pronounce people's names correctly, but I'm not sure how to pronounce yours. Is it just Friens? Mental health and ED. Yeah, that makes sense. And as far as the demographic of Frains. All right, Frains. You have two A and an I, so you mean Frains, or is it just Frains? I appreciate that, Remco. I do try. I don't want to make everyone be Smith. My own name is rarely pronounced correctly in America. People call me Lily. They just cannot possibly comprehend that Lyle is a name, even though it's in the culture. I would have guessed that it was Frisian. Dutch. Good to know that. But yeah. So when I go to stores, like, hey, can I take a name for your order? I've given up on being Lyle. If I say Lyle, they say Kyle, or they say Lily, or they can't read the damn thing. So I'm John Smith when I go to places. Name for the order, John Smith. So no one knows I've got a TARDIS parked around the corner. Let's see. So we're at the point from the where I'm doing. We're in the chat. I'm at where we were an hour ago on the first intermission, so I need to catch up. Yeah, Greenballs FX. I saw the Decilla. I saw the Paul Davids video. I discussed that last hour, and I think it's a good amp. I don't think it's revolutionary, but I discussed that in more detail earlier. I do like Paul Davids a lot. Let's see. Mitch likes the 62 concert. Yeah, that tremolo is fun, and you can do some very univibe kind of things with it. It doesn't go slow enough to do some of the Gilmore stuff, but it'll do the Hendrix and Trower stuff pretty nicely with no pedals. Yeah, the Magnetone is superior technically, but a lot more to go wrong with those. Hey, did Amnesia. The goal of the Variac is really to say, hey, I don't want the heater voltage to go over, say, 6.7. I don't want it to go under like 5.8. Anywhere within that is safe. And nominally you want to set the Variac to whatever point gives you 6.3 on the AC heaters, because that's what the designers were intending. But above and below that is a safety margin, and wherever you like. If you like it at 6 volts on the heaters, that's fine. If you like it at 6.5 volts on the heaters, that's fine. You just don't want it to be like 5.7 or lower, or 6.8 or higher. Unless you really know what you're doing and can afford to change out tubes as needed in a quest for a tone. Well, good. And just don't talk during the intermissions, during the ads. Sorry about the ads. I just need to make a little bit more money off these 3-hour things, and I don't want to interrupt. Believe me, YouTube wants me to give you a lot more ads than I do. And that 12-minute video I put up on the concert, it said I should have had 4 ads in the middle of it, and I just have the skipping 4, 3, 2, 1 at the beginning. Is it worthwhile to add a master volume to the 65 Basement? Yeah, it can be, because that's a really loud amp. And I've even got videos up showing how I install a Larmar master volume on that kind of circuit, including one on a 65 Basement or 66, that circuit, the AV165. And I would do that on my own. I love those nickel chassis. Would I say a Friedman Runt is good for blues or more of a rock tone? Either. I think the distinction is marketing. What is a blues tone? What is a rock tone? Rock and roll came from blues. I think if you got something to say and that's the amp you're using, it's going to sound good, and you'll be able to say what you want to say, whether that's in a rock and roll context or a blues context or anywhere in between. But it's like what is a jazz guitar? Is it an L5 with or 175 with all the tone rolled off? Not necessarily. Ted Green did just fine with a Telecaster. I think as far as the cliched sounds go, I think the Runt's more of a rock sound, but I don't think that would have stuck. I think Clapton could have done the Beano album with it, which was not at the time a blues sound, but it sure caught on. Hey, Wes thought it was Friday. I can relate to that. Have I gotten a look at a 64 hand-wired reissue Princeton Reverb Guts? Is the Headstrong a better purchase? Yeah, the 64 hand-wired Princeton and the Deluxe Reverb are garbage that they want way too much money for. For that money, you could buy a really good quality 70s. Headstrong's a better purchase. I've not been inside a Headstrong enough, so I can't tell you if I absolutely recommend it, but it has to be better. Has to be better than the 64 hand-wired series. Let's see. Hey, Daniel, is the clean channel on a Marshall DSL-40C that much lower in volume than the crunch channel? Most clean channels are lower in volume than most overdrive channels because there's a lot more gain, because there are more gain stages on the dirty channel, which is what gets you there. You can only get so loud clean, and that's why most amps that have a clean channel and a dirty channel have a master volume for the dirty channel separate. So you get as loud as you get your clean sound, you set the master volume of the entire amp to be where you want the clean to be. And then you get your distortion sound, there's a separate master volume for that channel, and you get that to match the level of the clean. But with that, if you were to have the clean channel on 5, the master volume for the total amp on 6, and that's as loud as you need to be, and you played the dirty channel with the master volume for the dirty channel on 10, you'd be much, much louder than the clean. That's just the nature of it. Everyone plays that game, makes those compromises. If you're if you're in the studio, you can keep everything as loud as possible, and do all the clean bits on this take, and on the next take I'll do all the overdrive bits. But for live use, it is a useful compromise to have the master volume on the dirty channel so it is not drowning out the clean. That is normal. It's not just that amp. Let's see. I'm trying to find the next question. That's the thing when I get into hey Eric, looking at a 74 Deluxe Reverb and feel like it could be a better buy than a clone Fender Reverb. Is it worth black facing? Well, the 74 Deluxe Reverb pretty much already is the black face Deluxe Reverb. They didn't make many changes to the Deluxe Reverb over time. Yeah, 74 is a better option than a clone Princeton. And I'm sure I've got I know I've got a 72 and a 73 Deluxe Reverb up on my channel in the Vintage Fenders playlist, same as the 74. Other than dealing with some wax in a 74, it's the same amp electronically as the 65, 66. The issue you might run into on a 74 is by 74, they no longer had the baffle screwed to cleats on the front panel. The front panel was no longer screwed to cleats. They went to a glued-in baffle, which is dadoed into slots, which seems like it'd be better, but the trouble is all those baffles, after 73, before 73, later 70s, 64, the very expensive stuff, that was all a pretty inexpensive particle board, and if that particle board gets damaged, which can happen, on the old ones, you can just take it out, put in a new one, because it's all screwed in place. On a 73 and later, with the glued and dadoed in, you have to have someone flush cut the old one out and then install cleats to put a new one in. But if your 74 you're looking at does not have any structural issues, it's a good amp. Just watch out for that, because those baffles can get messed up. And then you've got relatively expensive woodworking to deal with to get it back up and running. Hey again, Remco. Any thoughts and tips on the Fender Twin Amp PR448? I'm working on one with low filament voltage issues. Got it at 6.3 again, but only on pin 2 of the 606s and pin 9 of the preamp tubes. I am trying to remember if there's anything to do with that amp. Well, it sounds like you got... How are you getting 6.3 volts only on one side? What are you measuring between? Are you measuring to ground? Because to ground, it should be measuring 3.15 on pin 2 or pin 9, and then 3.15 on pin 7 and pins 4 and 5. All right, so measuring to ground. If you're getting 6.3 volts to ground, maybe it's got voltage but no current. Maybe it's been forced. Does that amp have a physical center tap or an artificial center tap? Maybe the artificial center tap resistor on the other side is shorted to ground. That will give you full wattage but no current on one side, nothing on the other side. Especially if it's one of the ones that had the stupid hum balance pots, because those pots burn out, and then you could have one side at ground. That's what I'd look at. Also make sure it doesn't have a stupid fuse. I don't think that did have a fuse in the heaters. But usually, you can get all that working without any tubes present in the amp, and you can even test the amp in standby and just isolate it just to the heater situation. It does have a fuse. All right, make sure you have a good fuse in the heater supply, because if that's the side that, usually people only fuse one side of the heater supply. If that's the case, that could explain why you don't have heaters on the other side. I'm watching your current replies. Hey Keith, good to see you. Did someone already ask about that 335? Well, maybe I'll get it out for you while I answer some other stuff. This is 63 reissue made in Memphis. Oh, wait. I need to use the right pick, the 5-watt World pick, in your honor. Love this thing. And usually I'd be able to let you hear it, but I don't have any amp set up to play for this right now. Made in Memphis, played in Memphis. There's your ad. Now, if Gibson wants to start giving me guitars, I'm open. But I have to go through about 100 to find one that I'd want to take home. This is one of the ones I wanted to take home. In fact, this is one of the ones that when my friend Hal was selling this, he brought this over to me to check to make sure it was in good shape so he could sell it. And I had to tell him that, well, I got good news and bad news. The good news is it's in fine shape. The bad news is it's not going home with you. It's not leaving this house. So you're only going to be allowed to sell it to me. Because when you find a really good one, and you've been doing this a while, you know when it's that good. And so Hal is great. We worked it all out. But yeah, I played that guitar. I'm like, nah, it's not going anywhere. But that Les Paul over there probably will have to. Hey, Wrecking Crew, thanks very much. Mom is doing better. What is the best EF86 AC15 style amp currently in production that's been on my bench? Ooh, I don't know because I've not had all of them. I'd like to try some of the Dr. Z stuff that they've done, like I think the Z-Rec. But I've not had one of those in. I liked aspects of some of the 65 amps stuff, the London. But I'm not sure if there's a current production one that I really, really liked. Certainly not the Vox Heritage series from about 15, 20 years ago. Remember, there's also the world of Gibsons with that 5781 or 5871 tube. The other Pinto, that thing, like the GA18T, the ones that, I think that's one of the ones that has this. Anyway, no, I'm sorry, the GA40. The GA40 Les Paul amp. That's got a Pinto that'll certainly rival any of the Vox Pinto stuff. Hey, Jeff, good to see you. If someone wants a Marshall-style amp without the overpriced tag and you have $700 to $1,500, is it possible? Plus, is the PRS HRDX 20 or 50 worth looking at? The PRS would be worth looking at. It's not where I'd send you, though. Yeah, I mean, for $700, $1,500, I would look at the Friedman 20-watt series. They've got some combos like the Runt 20 and some other 20-watt models that will do the thing in a 1x12 or a head or a head style, and you know, it's really good. You won't ever regret it, and it'll retain its value if you ever need this. If 20 watts turns out not to be enough, you need a 50 watt down the road. You know, it won't go to, its value won't depreciate too much, and they're just better built than anything Marshall's done in a long time. I mean, it's sad that you can buy it's not sad, it's good for us as players. You could go out and find a Friedman Runt 20 and a 1x12 for like $1,000 to $1,200. But to buy, say, a Marshall 1974X reissue, used, you're still looking at maybe $1,800 just because it says Marshall and the Friedman's the better amp. In that price range, also look at some top hats, some used top hats. Top Hat has got some really nice Marshall style, Marshall Voxy combinations in combo forms in that price range that are fantastic when they're used in that price range. Remco says go to Schelling in the Netherlands, or any of the islands north in the Netherlands. Maybe someday, but we're really trying to we want to go to Amsterdam for the museums, and work our way from museum to museum hopping and small town hopping. So The Hague and Brussels and Bruges and Delft, certainly Delft. You know, all these places. Ghent. I want to go to Ghent. Where the best Moule Fried? We don't know where the best Moule Fried is. We're gonna have to find that out. You know, this is it's gonna be a hard job, but someone's gonna have to do it. It's like when we were in Florence, and we had to find where the best gelato was. That was one we had to do it for science, man. It was tough. It is interesting to me that there are places that we just steadfastly refuse to call what they call themselves, like saying Florence when they don't say Florence, they say Firenze, saying The Hague when they say Der Haag. You know, just we're all adults. We should call it what you call it. We call it Lisbon and they call it Lisboa. You know, okay, I can say Lisboa, I can say Firenze, I can say Der Haag. What? It'd be like if we, we're, hey, welcome to Chicago. Oh, Chicago. No, it's not Chicago. It's Chicago. No, it's Chicago. You know, it's like deliberately mispronouncing other countries and cities is strange to me. And I find out way too late that I've been doing it all my life because that's what I was always told all my life. But I do want to go to Saint-Mère-de-Guise as well, Recon-Crew. It is on the way, but Bayeux is the destination, the westernmost point pretty much that we want to go to. And then a day or two in Paris and they go home. So land in Amsterdam, tool around, 10 days later or so, fly out of Paris, maybe 2 weeks if we can stretch. I think if we're not going to be in Amsterdam and Paris the whole time, we can make our money go a lot farther in the smaller towns in Normandy and Belgium. And it's going to depend on car rental prices versus whether we have to take trains and buses. But I really want to rent a car, at least for a big chunk of it, because you can discover so much that you don't already know. If you're on a train or a bus, you have your itinerary. You know you're going from point A to point B. You didn't know about these other 3 things you would have experienced. I don't think I'm going to be going to the red light district in Amsterdam. I've already got one, you see. It's quite very nice. John Steele was the paratrooper. Whew. Thanks, Wrecking Crew. I know that you guys are not looking at what I'm looking at in real time. I'm looking at the stuff that happened for you guys 40 minutes ago. But it all makes sense. It all makes sense in the end. Thank you, Arky. I appreciate that. Spent some time in Amsterdam on a layover, coming back from working in France. Mark Knopfler was playing that night. Oh, very nice, man. Oh, you didn't get to go. Oh, well, Mark Knopfler will be playing again somewhere someday. It's tough when you find those things. One night we were walking around in Paris, and we were over by the opera. We were in the opera district, and we saw the Olympia Theater, and I was about to tell Nikki, hey, that's where the Beatles were playing when they got the notification that they were #1 in America the first time. And then we saw what was written on the thing for the Olympia. It was Pixies tonight. And man, if I could have gotten tickets, Pixies are probably Nikki's favorite band, and to see Pixies at the Olympia would have just been icing on a very well-iced cake already. That was a fantastic trip. But unsurprisingly, they were all sold out. So we had to go drink wine and console ourselves, which is not a bad thing to do in the Marie. Did I just say the Marie? Marais. Sorry. I was reading while talking, which is a bad habit. Jack Smith had two uncles who fought on D-Day. Thank you for your uncle's service, or thank them. I guess you don't get any credit for it, but yeah, my grandfather was otherwise occupied in the Pacific. Let's see here. Hey, Sash DC. Curious to know my thoughts on how many preamp gain stages is too much when it comes to high gain amplifiers. Well, it depends on what you want to do, but at some point it does get farther and farther from being at all related to the source material. At some point you can no longer tell if you're playing a Tele or a Les Paul or an Ibanez or a Strat or anything. And I like to have the guitar's personality come through, or at least have a vote in what it sounds like. And the more gain you get, the less that can happen. I'd say as far as a gain stage goes, 4 is about as much as you'd probably want to go, because beyond that you're going to get into higher noise floors, more compression, less distinction. It's not going to stand out very much. And I think if you need more than that, there's a world of square wave devices in the world. You know, just a world of square wave devices in the world. You actually said that in front of people. You know, at some point, maybe you're better off with a fuzz pedal or some strange computer plug-in combination that gets you a really bizarre sound. Big Muff has got 4, but it's a different vibe to the tube thing. I've built tube amps with lots of gain, and I've built Big Muffs with lots of gains. Oddly enough, you usually don't want to use a Big Muff into a dirty amp, for the same reason you don't want to go more than maybe 4 or 5 gain stages in an amp, because it turns into just playing an electric lawnmower. But a good Big Muff or variant into a good clean amp, or mostly clean, then that's a horse of a different color. Hey, Max, do I answer random chat questions? I do. I answer as many random questions as possible. Advice for troubleshooting the cause of an unpleasant searing distortion sound from a 70s Trainer YBA1. That could be a lot of things. The first thing I would do is make sure that all the tubes are good. Make sure it's not just a tube before you chase your tail in some other way. You roll tubes. Make sure all the sockets are clean. See if it's caused by, when it's happening or on the verge of happening, if you tap wires or anything, find if anything triggers it. Sometimes that's a sign of a bad solder joint. Sometimes that's a sign of a poor ground scheme, and YBA1s have very strange ground schemes, and a lot of times I'll correct that, but that's outside the scope of troubleshooting. They have, it could be a microphonic capacitor, which is taking, as the gain goes up, that begins to actually vibrate in such a way that you're getting feedback. So get in there with a chopstick and tap on things and see if you can find it. It could also be the sign of a tube that's biasing incorrectly. It could be a preamp tube which is biasing incorrectly. So make sure all your electrolytics are been changed out and all your grounds are good. Or it could be imbalance in the output section, where you're not in class AB, you're in class B, basically. You're only getting one half of the waveform, or to some degree getting more of one side than the other. That's a little bit tougher to troubleshoot from here, other than what are your voltages. That's about as much as I can give you without seeing your amp or having more information. But yeah, I try to answer every question that gets asked within the 3 hours. I don't always get there. Hey Andy, what is a good, reasonably priced, entry-level video camera? It's going to depend on what your needs are. I will say that everything you've seen in my videos for the past 3 years are the one including right now, are the Sony ZV-E10, which has done me very well, and I really like it, and it is the least expensive pro level modern video camera on the market that I'm aware of that takes interchangeable lenses. There's some cheaper cameras that have a fixed lens, but the ability to change the lens is crucial. Now, so that's a $700 camera most of the time, sometimes $800, sometimes $600 something, but generally they're going for about $700. In this case, it is a $700 camera with a $500 to $700 lens. This is a Sigma 18 to 50 millimeter lens, and because of the APS-C, that's really 27 millimeters to about 75 millimeters. And that's the lens let me do all this kind of stuff. Notice that it keeps the exposure the same. It works with the autofocus just fine. This has been a game changer for me. And I'll be glad to talk to you off chat. Send me an email, I'll call you. But that's about where it starts. And I know that Keith at 5 Watt World used this same camera for multiple years. I think he has since moved to the Mark II version of the ZV-E10. He's here, so maybe Keith can weigh in. I am about to move up either to the Mark II version of the ZV-E10 or maybe move up to the FX30, which is the big brother of that camera. And Brad is using the what are you using, Brad? The one in between the ZV-E10 Mark II and the FX30, the A6700, I think it is. Anyway, he's getting phenomenal results now. The Mark II ZV-E10, the 6700 that Brad's got, and the FX30 are 10-bit cameras. This Mark I ZV-E10 is an 8-bit camera, so it is limited. But even this 8-bit camera gets much better video than this iPhone 16 Pro, which everyone says, hey, you know, all the ads, they tell you how great it is. It's okay. It's a backup. I use it for mobile stuff. It's nowhere near as good as this. And there, depending on what your roles are, you could have a fixed prime lens as opposed to this adjustable zoom lens. So if I were trying to save money for this situation right now, I'd just get the 16 millimeter fixed lens, which would give me about a 24 millimeter APS-C, and that's about $150, $200 lens, as opposed to the almost $700 lens I have here. But for what I need to do, or sometimes I'm showing you someone playing guitar, sometimes I'm showing you this, sometimes I'm just showing you one resistor. The ability to say, hey, check out this, and have you see it, and depending on the lighting, I could bring it even closer to you. That pays for itself, given what I need on the channel. There are some other systems that are really good, but Sony's really doing well as a broad spectrum of products. That's my recommendation. But crucially, get something with interchangeable lenses that there are a lot of lenses for, like the Canon R5 Wes is talking about, was a really great camera when it came out. But they changed, and Canon's still playing catch up in a lot of ways. Panasonic just did some leapfrogging up in quality, but they you have to pay an awful lot for their better stuff. Whereas Sony's got these entry levels that are fantastic. Acoustic guitar question. Do I have any working knowledge of the Dr. Herringbone Tone Traveler? They claim that it speeds up acoustic guitar break-in. Well, what's the fun in that? Letting some machine play my guitar? I want to do it. I think I saw something on that on Ted Woodford's channel. But I would ask Ted Woodford, because he's got more experience with this kind of stuff than I do. I'm sure it works to a degree. You're vibrating wood. But I really like doing the playing myself. And, this thing here is, I've had this about 3 years, I guess. It's breaking in just fine. Now, my Gibson that I've had for 25 years sounds better now than it did 25 years ago. But I just don't know that how much is probably a difference between not using the machine and using the machine, but I'm not sure how much of a difference. I'd rather just say play it every damn day. Let's see what Greenballs FX. His first gig was Iron Maiden at the Manchester Apollo in 1990. What was my first gig? First one I remember, downtown Mud Island, downtown Memphis used to have a park that said called Mud Island, and they had an amphitheater. And in the very early 80s, when I was like 12 or 13, people would go there and hang out. No one's gone to that thing in decades now. It was a total money pit, but they had a fantastic amphitheater for outdoor concerts. Occasionally concerts still happen there, very occasionally. But they used to do them all the time, and you could pay to go to the concert, but if you're just on Mud Island, you went to dinner or to look at the river or whatever, you could look over the wall and see down and see the band and hear everything. Anyway, I was there with my parents, 83, 84, so I was 12 or 13 years old. And the band that was playing was Chick Corea, his electric band. Might have been a little bit after 84, not too much anyway. John Patitucci was on bass, and Frank Gambale was playing guitar. So I think technically that was the first big gig I ever went to, though I was just looking over the wall at it. And my God, was it boring. It was so boring. They were not interesting to me. I imagine the first thing I ever saw would have been like 15 or 16. It would have been some local band playing. I think the first big show I ever went to, I was 15. Rush, Hold Your Fire tour. And later that year I saw someone else at the Mid-South Coliseum. That's a long-ass time ago. But my first live gig that I saw was Chick Corea Electric Band, and it was boring as hell. And I admire each one of those musicians for their accomplishments, but I don't enjoy listening to it. And that's not saying there's anything wrong with them or they're bad or that you're wrong for liking them. It just has always left me cold. Let's see. Is it worth... See, I'm not criticizing Tom here. If you see at the bottom right here where I say, please put three question marks before any questions, I almost missed Tom's questions. Maybe I need to make this bigger, but then it takes up screen real estate. Is it worth tweaking, modding, upgrading AC15C1, the custom classic, or just sell it and get a better quality amp? I have grown to not be as fond of the custom classic series now that they've come up with a much, much better custom series. Very confusingly named. The AC15CC1 is particularly not great in comparison to what they've done since then. It needs a lot of work, needs a lot of help. And I had one came in, the power transformer had died. And there is no replacement power transformer available for it. And I even got in touch with one of the vice presidents of Vox. And he said, no problem, we'll send you one. And he, with all his best intentions, really great guy, really great customer service. He told his warehouse to send me one. The warehouse doesn't have any. There aren't any. And he left. So I think those are kind of, when they die, they're going to be dead. So the question is, if you like it, keep on keeping on. But if you're not happy with it, get something else. You can get a used AC15C1, the custom, for like $400 or $500 a lot of times. That is an infinitely better amp, and it sounds a lot more like an AC, a true Vox than the Custom Classic did, especially the Custom Classic 15. Let's see. Hey, Goody Guitars. When I pull a chassis and the caps are all surface mount radials, do I pull the board and discharge the caps from bottom side? Well, a lot of places you can discharge the cap. If it's an amp, there's going to be a tube socket. If there's a tube socket, I've got access to a plate. And those plates are going to be going through resistors. So I can grab one of those. But I'll do that before I pull a board. If I already have the board pulled, sure, but in general, I'll just, if I can't access something directly on the tube, directly on the board, I'll access something connected to it. I'm skipping some stuff that I agree with, and like I said I typed at the time, you're goodin'. Let's see. Oh yeah, Wes discovered why we don't ever get Weber amp kits. Weber stuff is garbage. Their speakers are good. Their amp kits are garbage. How would passive attenuators like Weber's mass damage the amp they're hooked into? Is there an optimal amp type for pairing with a passive attenuator? Well, it's not so much that the device, when it's working properly, damages the amp. You're not going to get the optimal sound into a fixed resistor versus a variable resistor. It's not really a variable resistor, but it presents different impedances at different frequencies. But a fixed resistor is fine when it's all working. What happens, though, is you have a thing that was designed to turn excess wattage into heat, because that's the only way to change one form of energy into another, is the heat transference. It gets hot, something begins to fail. It gets hot, a solder joint gives out. All of a sudden you lose your load. That's when the damage to the amp happens. When the old device, which often wasn't built very well, if something goes wrong, it snowballs. And so I'm not a fan of a lot of the passive attenuators out there. And I don't recommend all modern attenuators, but I know that what Fryette's doing is right. I know that what Sir's doing is right. And as far as it is possible to make something high quality, nothing is perfect, nothing is foolproof, ask NASA. But to the best of their ability and with the best intention, I know that Sir and Fryette and even Universal Audio are trying to make something that's very reliable and least likely to fail. And they've addressed heat very well, especially in comparison to the stuff that was available in the 90s and 80s and 90s. And I just don't find that the Weber attention to detail has been great. See their amp kits. The speakers, however, are good. I'm not sure why there's such a disparity there, but there is. And, I got to call the balls and strikes. Good, and I'm not going to read your 4th of July comment, but know that I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I just think I'd be preacher shouting at the choir in here, and it's bad. Thanks, Goody Guitars. I can always count on you for a pair character doing a shaka sign with his hand saying, cool. Let's see, trying to get to the end. We got 4 minutes according to the time, but I want to make sure I haven't missed anything. Other people are using eyelet boards, Rob. Gibson was using them as well. The Gibson boards were much, much worse than Fender's. Have I noticed same amp vintage speaker versus modern speaker? Any pros to a vintage speaker? It depends on the amp. Like you have a Deluxe Reverb, I'd rather have a modern amp like a Creamback 65 or WGS ET65 than the original Oxford. When it comes to like a Super Reverb with the 10-inch Alnicos, the old CTS Alnico 10-inch speakers in a Super Reverb had a 1.5-inch voice coil. As far as I know, there is no modern 10-inch Alnico made with a 1.5-inch voice coil, just the 1-inch voice coil. And the speaker both doesn't last as well in a Super Reverb and doesn't have the sound. So when it comes to a Super Reverb, I want the original CTS Alnico. It can be reconed, that's absolutely fine, but that voice coil matters. So it's not like it's not like vintage are always better or new are always better. It depends on the character you're going for and the sound. But in general, for most amps, I'd rather have a specific new ones than old ones that are where the paper is all worn out. I can't tell you more about the Super Cub 12 Laney Ron, because I don't have much experience with Laneys. Sorry. I'm going to skip some questions as we get to the end. I just want to make sure. I think we're going to have to wrap this up, and I apologize. I try to get through. I try to get through every question, but some weeks we just don't. I will go back and read everyone's questions because I'm missing people's comments. Like here, working players recommending Utrecht and Breda, and Ghent and Brussels, and I will go back and read all this so that not a thing you said to me was wasted. I appreciate you all being here, but I just want to make sure that I'm not missing any super chats before we go. And I'm missing out on tons of comments that I want to, I wish I had more time to give. I don't. Andy, your first concert was George Jones. That would have been much better than Skynyrd, especially the reunion Skynyrd. But yeah, it'd be good to go see the old possum. He stopped loving her to die. I played that song for Nikki. The first time she ever heard it, we were driving back from Alabama, long old 78, going through Alabama and North Mississippi, and she didn't know all these country songs that I referenced. Cause I don't remember how it started, but anyway, I played He Stopped Loving Her Today and Good Year for the Roses for her. I played Good Year for the Roses first, then I played He Stopped Loving Her Today. Tears, just tears. She was wrecked. So, and Wes, you checked out Rochambeau by the Grays. He says it's awesome. I'm so glad, man. I thought you'd like that. I love that album. I love everything that they did before that and what they did after that. So, Rochambeau and by the Grays, you guys look for that. You can see that in the comments right now. Just fantastic. And Gruffalo, give a shout if you guys come to Brussels. I would love to. That is our plan. We're not sure when, and we have to make sure that Americans are still welcome and that we can afford to. That's our next European adventure planned. We may have to do a less expensive trip before that because occasionally we need sanity breaks. So Montreal and Quebec City are our backup, less expensive trip. Again, if we're allowed in. And I wouldn't blame you if you kicked us out. Which makes me very sad. Anyway, yeah, we're right here at the end. We're going to wrap this up. I really appreciate you all being here. I will go back and see all the comments that I've missed. And if anyone, I know that there were questions I could not get to. It's just a fact. The Queen of England doesn't know her ABCs. Hello. And the questions that get asked in the third hour, I don't always get to them. I'm sorry about that. But we keep trying. Y'all hit like more and give me more money, and maybe we'll do a fourth hour sometime. But not this time. See ya.